along an axis, and I
always said
can
that.
perfectly symmetrically divide this one along the axis. So I'm struggling to see what this article is saying.
Yeah, you've debunked the science there. OK, should we very quickly do The Guardian? And have we underestimated rats, Nicholas?
I love it how our producers give us these scientific stories this late to give me a challenge, to give us a challenge and expose me to
do it in about 10 seconds.
Nick Dixon. Rats have imagination. They have used treadmills and virtual reality to prove that rats can imagine moving along routes just like humans.
OK, Paul, in 13 seconds... No, actually, you've got a bit more. You've got 15 seconds from now to talk about rats.
Man,
Go.
I think until we have cured cancer, we should just leave rats and mice alone. This is getting beyond a joke now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was a big fan of Roland Rat. He doesn't get a mention in here at all, and he had a great imagination, Nick.
All right, well, that is the show pretty much over, but let's take another quick look at Friday's front pages. So, the Daily Mail has shadowy Tory number 10 fixer who had pet rabbit butchered in mafia-style warning to his ex-girlfriend. Tough on that, but we got through it. The Sun has Jesse and the road rage killer. The Guardian, top tech firms to let governments vet AI tools, Sunak tells government. The Express, don't ruin our nation's day of remembrance. The Mirror has the Grim Reaper, which of course is Matt Hancock. And finally, the Daily Star, Free Woolly, which we covered in great detail earlier. So that's it for tonight's show. Thanks to Paul and Nicholas. We're back tomorrow at 11 p.m. And if you're watching at 5 a.m, then stay tuned for breakfast. But for now, it's good night, good morning, and God bless.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Top of the morning, it's 6 o'clock on Friday the 3rd of November, and today, the second named storm in 2 weeks brings more hurricane-force winds, heavy rainfall and flooding, and Storm Ciarán isn't done yet.
Good morning. Storm Ciarán has now moved away, but we still have warnings out as some further flooding and other disruption is likely. I'll have more shortly.
The Channel Islands have been worst hit. Many schools across the south of England have been closed today too. Some are in the clean-up phase, whereas for others, the storm has just begun.
Escape from Gaza as hundreds more foreign nationals and the seriously injured are able to cross the border into Egypt as Israel claims their troops are at the height of battle against Hamas.
And just how did Charles and Camilla go down in Kenya? We'll take a look back at their first state visit as King and Queen.
And in your sport...
That'll be me. Vultures. That'll be me. Vultures hovering above Old Trafford, and as if a sports presenter would ever use a cliche, the magic of the FA Cup is back, and I'll be sick as a parrot if there's not a giant killing. Thank you very much. Back to you.
I do love a good old cliche, Cordy. Thank you very much. Good morning, I'm Martin Daubney.
And I'm Pip Thompson. This is Breakfast on GB News. Our top story this morning, Storm Ciarán has swept across the British Isles and the Channel Islands, leaving roofs torn off homes and cars smashed by golf ball-sized hailstones.
Gusts of up to 100 miles an hour recorded yesterday, and almost 20,000 homes and businesses across the UK were without power at lunchtime.
Should just say that that fella you just saw in that clip did survive.
Yeah.
He was a bit idiotic, but he is OK. Train services were disrupted across southwest England with heavy flooding and trampolines on the track. Planes were forced to go around. Look at that EasyJet flight as they struggled to land safely during heavy winds.
Trampolines on the track. The Met Office says it will continue to impact Scotland and parts of northern England, but strong winds will gradually ease throughout today.
Joining us now is Jim Dale, Senior Meteorologist at British Weather Services. Jim, a lot of people affected, but at the same time, a lot of people escaped this. I think it's been said many of us dodged a bullet here.
I think that's absolutely correct. If that storm would have been, let's just say, 100 miles further north, and I'm not knocking what happened down in the Channel Islands on the south coast, but if it had been 100 miles further north, there'd have been chaos, absolute chaos. And that would have been on level with the 1987 storm, if not worse. I'm not sure we'd have seen the 100-mile-an-hour winds that the Channel Islands got. In, for example, the London area, the land would have made it less so, the friction on the land. But even so, we would have been, we'd have had trees down, we'd have had, I'll use the word chaos because that's exactly what it would be.
Was it the Channel Islands then that was really in the eye of this storm?
The eye was just above, in actual fact. It was the southwestern side of it that was the worst area into the northwest part of France, where they saw winds of, and these are wind gusts, by the way, they're not sustained winds, so we're not talking hurricane. We might be talking hurricane status in terms of the gust ratio, but not sustained winds. But yeah, they saw 100-mile-an-hour plus winds as well, so that was the main sort of area, luckily for most of us, through the channel where nobody lives, as in the sea itself.
And Jim was seeing on the screen there pictures of waves crashing in at Dover and Penzance, floods across the Channel Islands. The media's calling this a weather bomb. My question to you, Jim, is what is a weather bomb? Where's it coming from? And where's it going next?
OK, so it's a lovely media term, Martin. That's what a weather bomb is. It's not a meteorological term. So this is an intense low that intensifies even further when it crosses the Atlantic and basically takes up the energy of the ocean that it's crossing. So what we saw during the summer is almost latent heat, if you like. What we saw during the summertime was record Atlantic temperatures. So almost like a boiler in actual fact, not in relative terms. So what that was doing as it crossed, it was picking up. It got into the jet stream, it picked up the energy from the oceans, that fed it, that's the intensity, and essentially the low pressure, the pressure started to drop as it approached the UK. It reached 953.3 millibars, which is a record for November. It's not an all-time record. That was in Scotland, and that was 925.
1877.
There you go. So, 80, yeah, and that's Scotland rather than the south, where you normally get these low-pressure areas far deeper. So that's your bomb. I think bomb's a good word for it. It describes exactly what goes on, because the power and energy involved with that is released, and that's why you get the devastation that we've seen.
Because what happens then is, as I did O-level meteorology, so when the pressure drops...
Have you been a weather presenter as well?
I can do anything
among all these other things you do.
When the pressure drops massively, basically the wind piles in from the outer lip, and that causes this huge wind that follows the storm, and that's what we've been battered by.
Yeah,
let's just... Sorry, Jim, I just want to show people, our viewers anyway, some of the pictures that we have had in from you guys. You've sent them in to us. Have a look at this.
I'm in Jersey, Channel Islands, where the storm passed through us in the early hours of this morning. So between 2, 3, 4 o'clock, winds were reaching up to 104 miles an hour, caused extensive devastation, particularly in the south of the island. Many residents evacuated throughout the night by the emergency services, who were fairly well stretched. It is only a small island, and yet, as you can see in the background, there's still a lot of heavy rain in the sky, but generally the winds are just starting to ease off. Fortunately, I was pretty lucky, as you can see in the background, just a load of fence panels down, so I count myself very lucky, unlike many residents.
Here in Guernsey, the intensity of the storm hit us at around 2:30 a.m. and has been continuing to batter the island ever since. We've seen reports of over 70 trees down, and that's probably just the ones reported on main thoroughfares. In Guernsey, we have lots of small roads that they're covered in debris, and the clean-up operation is going to take some time yet. The government made a decision on Tuesday to close all schools, given the intensity that the storm was going to have, and that meant that businesses also made the decision to close today. So pretty much we're in lockdown here in Guernsey.
Broken, gone. Broken, gone for the roofs and the houses. Police cars littering the roads, ambulances, fire engines. I wouldn't be surprised if all the fire engines were out last night. Our next door neighbour, Doris, her house was flooded. My mum and dad were going around there to help them. There's like 2 tons of sand on all our balconies, just being thrown over. Yeah, Jersey is pretty much said to everyone, don't go into work. The majority of us just got the day off, and you can see why, because it was carnage. Everything was just getting blown to the right.
So Jim, picking up on the point you made there, I mean, scenes of devastation there on the Channel Islands, Jersey and Guernsey. Jess, by the way, what a great weather girl she makes.
Yeah, Stephen, Jess and Jack, thank you ever so much for sending in that footage, because it gives us all such a good idea of what you've gone through in the last few hours. And Doris as well, I do hope she's OK.
And as you said, if that had been 100 miles further north, then that kind of devastation would have been right across the southeast, southwest, all the way through.
We can go back to 1987. I don't know whether you remember it.
Yeah, I do.
But trees down, deaths. There were deaths in the continent, by the way, in Europe.
There's been several deaths, haven't there?
Yeah, there has. So it wasn't just a case of buildings falling and trees falling. And, you know, but one thing to say is that I'm really pleased that the forecast that went out, even though there's a margin of error within the scope of that, we were given plenty of time, which is why the choice of closing schools, etc., was put there.
Looking forward, Jim, to today and the weekend. It does seem like we've had the worst of it. Well, am I correct in saying that? Because I know many people's bonfire nights have been cancelled, which is such a shame because of this.
Where are we today? Third today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it third? Yeah, third. So we got another couple of days, but normally it's a Saturday, isn't it? So I'm going to use the word damp squib. Can I use that? Because there is another storm coming tomorrow. I say a storm. To make this clear, it's not a windstorm as such. It's more rain involved.
Has it got a name?
Not yet. If it does get named, because of the rain, because of the saturated ground, it'll be called Debbie, D-E-B-I. That's the next one in
Storm
line.
Debby.
We'll see. It's not yet named. It's not my job to name them. But if that comes along, it'll be more of a rain event. And at the moment, I think the yellow warnings are down in the very far southeast, so Kent, Sussex way. So just be aware of that, a damp squib bonfire night.
OK, Jim Dale, thank you for all the latest updates on Storm Ciarán. Cheers.
Thank you.
And we'll bring you a weather forecast as well very shortly. We'll keep you right up to date, don't worry.
That's right. Moving on now. Israel says its forces have completed the encirclement of Gaza City as it continues to strike Hamas militants in populated areas, with a spokesman calling it another significant stage in this war.
Meanwhile, in the south, civilians have continued to pass through the Rafah crossing in Egypt, with the Foreign Office able to confirm that a number of British nationals are among them.
Our security reporter Mark White has this latest report.
Well, as the battle continues to rage in northern Gaza, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israeli troops have passed through the outskirts of Gaza City. It's believed that the Israeli military is intending to encircle Gaza City before that decision is taken to move in proper to deal with Hamas. Well, the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has begun his trip to the region. He's reaffirmed the US belief that Israel has a right to defend itself. The US, like many other allies, is calling for humanitarian pauses, but not a ceasefire. And as the battle continues to rage across Gaza, Israel is also defending other fronts. We had significant rocket attacks from Hezbollah in the north of the country yesterday, with Kiryat Shimona, one of the communities that suffered a direct impact from one of those rockets. And it comes just ahead of a speech today by the leader of Hezbollah, Saeed Hassan Nasrallah. Whatever he says, most here believe it will signal an increase in the attacks from the north.
And that was Mark White from Israel. He'll be joining us throughout the show. Moving on now, King Charles's 4-day state visit to Kenya concludes today. Despite falling short of making a full apology for atrocities suffered by Kenyans during their struggle for independence from the British colonial rule in the 1950s, the visit has been widely deemed a great success.
Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker looks back at the visit.
His Majesty's first Commonwealth visit since secession, full of ancient traditions. Pomp and pageantry was on full display in Nairobi for a ceremonial welcome from President William Ruto. Kenya's celebrating 60 years of independence from Great Britain, and the palace is keen to celebrate the country's shared history and friendship. But Kenya has a painful past.
The wrongdoings of the past are a cause of the greatest sorrow and the deepest regret. There were abhorrent and unjustifiable acts of violence committed against Kenyans as they waged, as you said at the United Nations, a painful struggle for independence and sovereignty.
An estimated 90,000 Kenyans were killed, tortured or injured during their fight for independence, according to the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Some are upset the King did not offer a full apology, but His Majesty did meet privately with relatives of survivors to listen to their concerns. The British government also paid out almost £20 million in 2013 to around 5,000 Kenyans in an out-of-court settlement. But there have been some happier moments too. The Queen helped feed orphaned baby elephants at the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Nairobi, before being joined by King Charles to meet a baby rhino. Conservation is key to these animals' survival, and the royals were highlighting the work Kenyans do to protect them. At the Commonwealth War Graves, the King re-presented medals to an 117-year-old World War II veteran, thought to be one of the oldest men in the world. He also looked to the future, watching the Kenyan military display a mock beach landing in Mombasa, trained by the British Royal Marines. Further up the beach, King Charles also saw coral being replenished and young people supporting beach cleanups, protecting the environment for future generations. Today, the King and Queen finished their state visit to Kenya, with more engagements planned this morning in Mombasa. Cameron Walker, GB News.
I think it's safe to say it's probably more of a success than the Prince and Princess of Wales's visit. to the Caribbean.
Yeah, and it's really moving how one of the things that struck me, you know, because of the atrocities in the 50s, and King Charles yesterday met a surviving relative, the great-grandson, I think, of one of the people who went through it, and Charles chatted with them and apparently found a great deal of common ground and peace. So that's what I think is really good about this. It's that soft power, that building the allegiance with the Commonwealth. I think it's been a great success.
Soft diplomacy, as we keep saying. OK, it is 6:15 already, and if you've just joined us, a reminder of our top stories this morning. Storm Ciarán, the second named storm in 2 weeks, brings more hurricane-force winds, heavy rain and flooding. And if you were just listening to Jim Dale, it's not necessarily done yet.
Yeah. And while the storm hits the north of the country, the clean-up begins in the south.
Escape from Gaza. Hundreds more foreign nationals and the seriously injured are able to cross the border into Egypt as Israel claims their troops are at the height of battle against Hamas.
Darker nights and hazardous driving conditions will lead to more deaths on our roads. This year has seen a spike in the number of road accidents already.
Yeah, that warning has come from the Safe Drive Stay Alive campaign, which brings together emergency services and families that have lost their loved ones. They're appealing for better driving to save young lives. Sophie Reaper has more.
I know that this feeling I've got now in the pit of my stomach, I've got that till the day I die, until when I can hold him in my arms again.
5 years ago, Anne-Marie's 17-year-old son, Colin, was killed in a road traffic accident. He was a passenger when the young, inexperienced driver lost control. 3 people died that night, including Colin. Looking back, Anne-Marie says she wishes her son had never gotten into that car.
There's something else, right, and I've never said this. So that night, he had no money and I gave him 20 quid. And I said, go and get some beers with your mates, because I thought he was camping. And I always think I wish I'd never given him that £20, because I always think, was he going to get beers because of me? And I know that what he would be saying to me is, for God's sake, Mum, stop telling everybody about me, everyone you meet, because I do. I don't want anybody ever to forget my Colin, because he was my baby, and he lived.
Now, in order to prevent what happened to Colin happening to other young people, Anne-Marie speaks every year in the Greater Manchester Safe Drive Stay Alive campaign.
5 years for me, and it could be yesterday.
Over the next fortnight, thousands of young people will hear from emergency services speakers, as well as family members of people who've been killed on Greater Manchester's roads.
I think it's vitally important that we get the message out.
Earlier this year, Calvin Buckley lost his partner Frankie and their unborn baby Neve in a road traffic collision. 22-year-old Adil Iqbal was filming himself driving at 123 miles per hour on the M66 when he lost control and hit Frankie's vehicle. Just a week before the accident, Calvin had learned for the first time they were expecting a baby girl.
So I've gone from the gender reveal, which was probably the happiest, proudest moment of my life, surrounded by friends and family, full of hope and optimism and just, you know, excited about my future, to within a week, it all being taken away from me, left with complete devastation and my world just completely crushed and turned upside down.
In the last decade, there have been 133 young driver-related deaths in Greater Manchester alone. In response, Safe Drive Stay Alive aims to make young people safer on the roads before it's too late.
We like to think, or would hope to think, that it would change their sort of views on driving. It is a problem. It's not just Greater Manchester the problem is in. It's a nationwide problem. My message would be to basically slow down. It's far better to sort of be alive the following day and have your family still behind you than it is, as you've heard today, for some people who've not made it. So, you know, our motto is Safe Drive, Stay Alive, and I think that sums it up. Slow down, take care and drive safely.
Safe drive, stay alive. Safe drive, stay alive.
Safe drive, stay alive.
Now marking its 10th year, this campaign is the ultimate reminder that behind every life lost on our roads, there's a grieving family left behind that will never be whole again. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Yeah, those sorts of things are so important. I took my kids on this Safe Drive simulator. It's a country fair at Market Harbour. It was ran by the local police force. And we sat there and it's replicated, it moved about and everything like a proper simulator. It replicated an accident where the young people were playing with the radio, fiddling around, joking, and it was really quite graphic. And it was footage of them getting thrown through the windshield. And my son at the time was 13, was really sort of struck by it. But he remembers it. He remembers that experience, and it's so important because most accidents, Pip, on the roads are youngsters.
Yeah. There were 2 girls at my school, in my class, that passed away in road accidents when they were in their... Yeah, I think they were 17, 18. It really makes you stop. And so brave of those families to chat to Sophie there and really spread that message.
I was really moved by Calvin there, that young lad, to use what happened to him to try and help others. It's good on you, mate. OK.
Let's get more weather. We get more of a weather forecast for all you now. We heard from Jim Dale earlier. We've been talking about Storm Ciarán. He mentioned we could have Storm Debbie. Let's find out what's going on.
Good morning, it's Alex Burkill here again with your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it won't be anywhere near as stormy as it was yesterday for many of us, there is still some unsettled weather around, particularly across eastern parts of Scotland, northeast England. A deep area of low pressure that was Ciarán is now bringing some heavy rain and some strong winds here. We could see some further flooding and disruption to travel given how wet it has been in this area during recent weeks. Also a scattering of showers elsewhere, mainly coming in from the northwest. Some of them could be heavy and thundery, but with sunny spells in between. In the south, we're likely to see highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. Further showers continuing as we go through the evening and overnight. Still, some of them could be heavy. Couldn't rule out some rumbles of thunder, mainly in areas exposed to that northwesterly wind. And then towards the end of the night, some persistent rain and strong winds starting to push into the far southwest. We may see a few mist and fog patches developing further north, and it could be a little chilly where we see any clear skies developing as well. Through Saturday itself then, any mist and fog will clear through the morning, and then this swathe of wet and windy weather spills its way northwards across many parts of England and Wales. Something drier to the north of it, though, some showery rain across the far north of Scotland and heavy showers following in the south, and these could cause some impacts as we go through the afternoon and the evening across southeastern parts. Temperatures similar to today, likely to see highs of around 14 or 15.
If you are celebrating bonfire night, and if your event hasn't been cancelled, then take a brolly, take your wellies.
Could be a bit of a washout.
It could be a bit of a washout. I'm sure you'll still have fun, though.
Debbie might put a dampener on things. Anyhow, coming up, Paul Coyte will be here with all your latest sports news, including the chaos at Manchester United.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys. On GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back at 6:25. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Pip.
And it is time to go through all the latest sports news. Plenty of it. And for that, we are joined by GB News Breakfast sports presenter Paul Coyte.
Good morning. Right. Twice in a week now, Pip.
I know, aren't I lucky? Aren't I lucky?
And you've got your red poppy on, but there's chaos for the Red Devils. Anarchy. And it's got to be said, everyone likes a bit of chaos at Manchester United, perhaps even United fans.
Do you think so?
What's the latest?
Do you think so? Well, the latest is it's Erik ten Hag and the manager. See, this is a very strange tenure, shall we say, for Erik ten Hag.
That's one way of putting it.
Well, he comes in from Ajax, and I was one of the people that said this is not going to work. It's just not going to work at Manchester United.
Yeah, but you would say that, being a Spurs fan.
Well,
nothing would work for you at Manchester United.
I see what you're saying. There's a difference between I don't think it's going to work and I don't want it to work. Whereas in this case, I was saying, look, I didn't think it was going to work. But then I'll be honest, within a few months, things did start to fall into place, and I put my hands up and said, yeah, OK, I was wrong. But now maybe it looks like maybe I was right. The way we're looking at it at the moment, cut a very long story short, is that Erik ten Hag, very strong disciplinarian. Now, he's dealt with Ronaldo. When Ronaldo was kicking off and he said, I'm not having any of that, I want him out of the club, he's causing problems. So he won that battle. Now, Jadon Sancho, another fine young player,
Yep.
He's had problems with him. This was about a month or so ago when he was left out the Arsenal side, and Erik ten Hag had said it's because he's not training properly and we're not happy with the attitude. Jadon Sancho went against that on Twitter. Probably not a good idea to do that, but said, that's not true. So he's been left to train with the kids. He's away from them. Now, this can only go one way. These days, is that if you're a real disciplinarian and you've got players that are millionaires and they can do whatever they like, they're the real stars, it's pretty much player power. And I have a feeling, and there are words coming out, that actually they're not happy with Erik ten Hag. And they're the ones...
That player power would not have existed, would it, under Sir Alex Ferguson?
Absolutely correct. But we say that, if Alex Ferguson was managing now, I kind of wonder.
Really?
I actually don't think... There's so few managers that could get away with that. But now, I just don't think it's a thing anymore, and it's got to be a balancing act. And also, you've got to handle players in a different way.
And the entire dressing room is again him, and they've lost, 8 out of their first 15 games, the first time since the 1962-63 season.
Yep.
That's not good enough.
It's not good enough at all.
It's not good enough for the top brass. The big question is, how long is this fella going to last? Is he a dead man walking? Will he win the sack race?
Well, Fulham is looming. That's who they play next. Now, if they lose to Fulham, they've lost 3-0 twice. But also, I think the other thing that's probably helping Erik ten Hag is this buyout situation with the Glazers and also Sir Jim Ratcliffe. So it may give him a little more time, because they probably don't want to sack a manager now before, I say it's a buyout, it's 25%, but he would take care of the football side of the business.
They want a bit of continuity,
I think so. I think maybe they'll wait, but it could be a situation where they've got no choice. I tell you one thing, he ain't going to last. He's not going to last. Whether it goes through to the end of the season, whether it's Christmas, he will not see the season out. I'm pretty sure about that.
Let's talk about the FA Cup first round. Starts today, and I'm delighted, being a Midlands girl, to see that Walsall are playing.
Yes.
Not that I'm going to make it there tonight, unfortunately, but Sheppey United.
Well, the thing is, Walsall, they're the big club in this compared to Sheppey United. Sheppey United and the Isle of Sheppey play in the Isthmian League South East Division, which means they are 93 places below Walsall. So it's...
Stranger things have happened.
Stranger things have happened.
It's the
first round. It's the first round. It's usually the third round of the FA Cup that happens in January. That's when we really see the giant killing. But it's the magic of the FA Cup. It's the first round proper, as they like to call it. So it's always nice to see the underdog. Of course, that's what we love about the FA Cup. So how far they can go, I don't know. I think probably Walsall will put them to the sword tonight. But if they don't, they've got another one to get through, and then they will make it with all the big boys.
Is the FA Cup still like a valid tournament? Smaller clubs, I include myself in that as a Forest fan.
Well, do you? Do you call a smaller club?
Well, of course you are.
I don't think your Forest fan friends would be too happy with what you just said.
I'm pragmatic. I was a born pessimist, and if we win, that's a bonus.
OK.
But look, is it still a valid tournament? The earlier rounds are always fantastic, but it generally gets won by one of the bigger clubs. Still a valid... I mean, when I was a boy, the FA Cup was the tournament on the planet.
But you know why? It's because it was the only live football game. So it meant everything. So during May, when we got to the FA Cup final, it was the only thing apart from the England-Scotland game that was on TV. So it meant everything. Now, it is kind of being downplayed. I still love the FA Cup. I think it's incredibly important. Fans want to win the FA Cup, so yes, it is.
Superb. OK, Coity, excellent stuff as usual. OK, it's bang on 6:30. And if you just joined us, here's a reminder of our top stories this morning.
The second-named storm in 2 weeks brings more hurricane-force winds, heavy rainfall and flooding. Storm Kieran isn't done yet.
And the Channel Islands have been hammered the worst. Many schools across the south of England have also been closed today.
Escape from Gaza. Hundreds more foreign nationals and the seriously injured are able to cross the border into Egypt. Israel claims their troops, meanwhile, are at the height of battle against Hamas.
And also in the news today, the Metropolitan Police has vowed to use all its powers to stop disruption of Remembrance Weekend commemorations amid ongoing pro-Palestinian protests.
Beatles superfans were the first to get their hands on the historic final single from the band at a special midnight launch event in Liverpool.
And FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried was found guilty on Thursday of stealing from customers of his now bankrupt cryptocurrency exchange in one of the biggest financial frauds on record.
Coming up, how would you fancy having dinner in outer space? Seriously, that could be a possibility. We are going to be talking about that and much more very shortly. This is GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new
Yes, I
teeth.
know.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 6:34. Let's have a look now at some of the stories making headlines today, and we'll start with the front pages.
The Times leads with Elon Musk warning that AI intelligence will eliminate the need for all jobs. A few of you might be happy about that.
Wishful thinking, perhaps. The Daily Mail, meanwhile, leads with an exclusive on Nadine Dorris's new book.
The Daily Express leads with fears over Armistice Day being disrupted by pro-Palestinian protesters in London.
And meanwhile, The Telegraph leads with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak speaking with tech boss Elon Musk.
Plus, the Daily Star reports on the daring hovercraft mission to free Woolly, Britain's loneliest sheep.
Can always rely on the Star to really nail the biggest news story of the day. Join us to go through some of those headlines is the deputy editor of Spite, Fraser Myers, and broadcaster and forecaster and author James Woodhousen. Good morning to you, gents. Can we please start with this protest that's been planned? Start with you, Fraser. The Express are covering this. We covered this yesterday. News that pro-Palestinian supporters are being ferried in from places like Batley. Batley, of course, where the teacher is still in hiding because of Muslim extremists. And the big story is that it may cause disruption on Armistice Day when we mark the 2-minute silence for the end of World War I. What's the latest?
Well, so, as everyone knows, there are these now weekly pro-Palestine marches through London, going through Whitehall. Obviously, that goes past the Cenotaph most of the time. The organisers this week have said, we don't want to go near the Cenotaph, we don't want to disrupt Remembrance Day, but someone from a chap who edits the Muslim news website 5 Pillars has said very explicitly that, you know, screw your Remembrance Day, screw the, you know, fallen soldiers. We want to disrupt it. We're going to be noisy. We don't respect these things. So there is potentially a huge amount of tension here. People are obviously worried about how these events have been policed. A lot of people think they've been policed too softly. It's pretty clear that, you know, if other protests had said things as extreme as some of these protesters have, they might have faced legal action.
That's the thing, though, Fraser. It's some of those protesters. I think we have to be careful in making out that, it was tens of thousands of people that were saying extreme things. It wasn't. It was some of them.
I agree with that, and I think that's, there's always some wrong-uns on every march. But I think what is interesting about this is that, there isn't there isn't an internal desire among the protesters to get rid of these extreme elements. I don't see anyone confronting them. I don't see anyone confronting the people shouting jihad, saying that's not what we're about. But also in terms of the legal response. Now, I'm in favour of free speech. I think people should be able to say whatever the hell they like. But it's quite telling that, the police, when people were shouting jihad, for instance, they decided to say, well, there's many interpretations of jihad. That could mean just in a peaceful struggle. Whereas, if you misgender someone on the internet, you will have 6 coppers turn up at your house.
Yeah, James, it's not just the more radical Muslim community. The Anti-Capitalist Action Group, the usual ragbag of socialists, are also saying they will dishonour this 2-minute silence. This is a deliberate act of confrontation. It's set out to divide, isn't it? We agree with freedom of expression, but we've got a Tory MP today on the front page of the Express saying we should send in the army. The Met are saying they've spoken with organisers and they assure them they won't be naughty, honest governor. If you believe that, I've got a used car I'd like to sell you. But the fact of the matter is, this is a direct assault on the most sacrosanct of British values, remembering the war there. Do you think this protest should go ahead?
Well, like Fraser, I favour free speech. I think the more worrying thing, apart from what you've mentioned, Martin, is the activities of Iran and the IRGC. There's a story, they're revolutionary violent guards. There's a story in the Times this morning about just how extensive their network could be. And I think that they will stop at nothing. If they don't do it on Remembrance Sunday, they're going to do something.
And what you mean by that is that there are agents that they are placing within the UK to specifically cause this trouble?
Yes, it need not be violent just yet. It's largely to do with propaganda and infiltration and subversion. But I think it'd be very foolish to discount their influence and the general influence of Iran in the Middle East and around the world. It's much underrated.
Now, the concern, of course, Fraser, is, I've already seen veterans groups are mobilising, because that's what happens, right?
Yeah.
If they believe, particularly the cenotaph, which they see as absolutely sacred, is violated, not for the first time, because we've seen it during the Black Lives Matter protests, maybe that set the template for all of this. But if that does happen, and if we see, heaven forbid, nobody wants to see it, if we see rolling battles between veterans and protesters, this could be a defining moment in what the media like to dismiss as the culture war.
That would be a really, really awful sight. You know, no one wants to see that. I think what's interesting is looking at what the police consider to be a provocation in this sort of context. So you have essentially when the police were taking down, the posters of hostages because some police officers believed that was provocative in some way, that might provoke pro-Palestine protesters. You also have police telling the campaign against anti-Semitism that they can't drive their van around, showing, again, the victims of the Israeli kidnapping. Isn't it just as provocative to, march on Remembrance Day or to march near the Cenotaph on Remembrance Day? Will the police react in the same way? I don't know.
I think the police, they are in a difficult situation, aren't they, in terms of what they can and cannot do. And also, there's a problem with when you arrest people, how long it's actually going to take them to get to court anyway.
Yeah, and does that kick off, more trouble? Do people see someone getting arrested and, they see their friends getting arrested and they pile in?
Yeah, but, I might be wrong, but when you talk about running battles between veterans and protesters...
Could happen.
Do you really...
I'm not saying I want it to happen, I'm saying it could
Do you think the
happen.
majority of protesters... pro-Palestinian protesters want to be in running battles.
It doesn't matter about a majority. It matters about if anybody at all goes to attempt to desecrate the cenotaph. I think it would be a hugely provocative act. And James, this could be
barricaded, hasn't it?
But this could be stopped. The police have put Section 12 orders in place before. On these same marches, you're not allowed to go outside a certain area or you will be nicked. Surely they could say, Whitehall is closed to this protest. If you go anywhere near the cenotaph, you're nicked. They could do that. Do you think they should?
Well, it's hard to call, isn't it, Martin?
Why is it?
Well, because, we want to defend the right for free speech. If we set a precedent now by clamping down too much, not on violence, which should be clamped down on, but on free speech, then other groups, much more reputable than the people involved in this protest, will be prevented from protesting. And therefore, we have to be very careful. I think if you compare the police in the miners' strike, and many of them are regretful about what they did in the miners' strike, and you look at the kid gloves inspired by the Hendon College of Policing, which personifies woke, if we must use the term, I'd rather not, then you can see just how much the police have changed, and the double standards to which Fraser refers really are egregious. And, it's only a matter of time before liberal critics of the government and people who dissent in general are targeted more widely than those who just simply oppose the trans extremists in our midst.
Well, it's a hugely provocative talking point. Let us know what you think about this throughout the show. gbviews@gbnews.com. I'm sure we'll return to this throughout the next week because it's a story that simply won't go away. Shall we move on, Pip, to another story? What do we have next?
Well,
what about
this restaurant where you can have one of the finest culinary experiences. It'll cost you a pretty penny, mind, at the edge of space. Who wants to talk about this?
Well, this is incredibly exciting.
Would you do it?
I would, but I don't think I can afford the $100,000 price tag, unfortunately.
Is it £100,000?
Unless someone wants to sponsor me.
I thought it was £100. I didn't admit that wrong.
So talk us through how it works.
So it's basically you go up and almost like a bit like a hot air balloon. It's not quite, but it's working on the same principle, and essentially it takes you up to the edge of space. So you have this view of the Earth, and that's probably the most exclusive fine dining experience you're ever going to get.
Well, if you're dining up there, I think I would probably be sick. How can you actually eat up there?
I think
without throwing up.
I think you'd want to stare at it, or you'd just marvel in wonder. I would have thought. I wouldn't be thinking about food.
For those who can't see, if you're listening on radio, it's basically like a giant sort of cross between like a Zeppelin and a hot air balloon with a kind of glass orb, a floating dining space, $100,000 a pop, Michelin-starred chefs. It's basically for the high flyers, literally. James, this is for the toffs. $100,000.
Who have a strong stomach.
But I think, if I may, what it tells us about is, I think, my judgment on the French, which is impossible but terrific. It was Montgolfier, after all, who invented the hot air balloon, and they're very inventive, the French. That's underrated in Britain. I think, you know, when they're particularly mad about food, as we know, and, you know, I've never indulged in that bird soup or whatever it is, where you get the white tablecloth over your head to kind of get the full width.
What are the practicalities of it as well? Like, where do you cook it on the ground?
No,
then how long will it take to actually get up there?
No, they do
or
it.
Do you cook
they
it up
do it in midair.
I think they do it midair. I think it's big enough for them to have a kitchen.
But what happens if the vol au vent become weightless? I mean, you're sort of grabbing around for it, or...
I don't think it's quite high enough to become weightless.
I will believe this when I see it.
Earth's orbit.
It sounds quite incredible.
All right, gents, stick around. We're going to come back to you shortly, but for now, it's 6:45. And if you just joined us, a reminder of our top stories this morning.
Storm Kieran, the second named storm in 2 weeks, brings more hurricane-force winds, heavy rainfall and flooding. It isn't done yet.
And whilst the storm hits the north of the country, the clean-up begins in the south.
Escape from Gaza. Hundreds more foreign nationals and the seriously injured are able to cross the border into Egypt as Israel claims their troops are at the height of battle against Hamas.
OK, now we're back to our headline makers, Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and forecaster author James Woodhousen. Thanks for joining us. You're still here. James, picking up on the story we covered earlier, really, this report here saying more than half of people feel that politicians are using the so-called culture wars to distract from other issues. Tell us more.
Well, it's a PA news report quoting King's College survey done by Ipsos into what the public think about the culture wars. I'm bound to say that the headline, which is, you know, oh, it's all a distraction, say the public, doesn't really do justice to the small print. If you read the small print, a lot of people are exercised by the culture wars, think that they exist, and they're not dismissing them. And people are quite worried about the potential for division there. So you have to read the whole story. I think I agree. I've always felt that and I've already said that the term woke is insulting, and it's okay as because
I mean, it's taken on a bit of an energy, hasn't it? The term woke, because originally it means caring about society,
being awake.
And now the media, I have to say, the media has developed it into and exaggerated it into something very different.
Yeah, but within this survey, actually, specifically, when you look at the fine print, 42% of respondents said that they would see woke, the term, now as an insult, versus in 2020, just 3 years ago, only 24%. So it has now become a badge of dishonour. But, Fraser, I wonder if these kind of reports that try and downplay the culture war sort of miss the point, because people do really care about things such as protesting against the Poppy Day at the Cenotaph. As we just said, people do really care about this. They do really care about topics like immigration. All these reports from King's College London, very liberal academic institution, are they trying to just dismiss things because it suits their agenda?
I think there's a sort of common tactic on the woke side, if you want to call them that, which is usually something outrageous gets proposed, like self-ID for transgender people. And then if you hit back against that and you say, actually, for all these problems, it affects women's rights, gay rights, etc., then you're accused of stoking a culture war. It's culture war for thee, not for me, which I think is the problem here. But yeah, people do care about these issues. People care very much about the erosion of free speech. How could that not be an important issue? And in many ways...
Do people not care more, though, about what happens in their day-to-day life, like the cost of living, how much money they've got in their bank at the end of the month, whether they can get a mortgage or not? Those aren't surely the issues that are affecting people more on a day-to-day basis.
I think that's true, but I don't think they're entirely separate from the culture war, because the culture war isn't just about pronouns and things like that. It's a general sense that, I don't know, our society is kind of feels under attack, that people are rejecting Western civilization. We have a general lack of confidence in society, and that, you know, will have economic effects. That will have effects on political decision-making, things like that.
And you're dead right to that, because this report itself says precisely that people care about the cost of living crisis more, they care about the NHS, they care about inflation. Of course they care about those things, but that isn't to say they can't also care about the erosion of women's spaces, about the desecration,
I'm
the
just
erosion
not
of our
sure
own
how many
culture.
families around the table at tea time would necessarily be talking about the erosion of women's spaces.
Well, they would do if it affected their daughter, say, at their local swimming pool. I think that's the point. If it impacts upon your life, people care. And I think things like, you know, do we care about Remembrance Day? We deeply, deeply care about that. And I think to dismiss things like that as a culture war, James, is a mistake. It doesn't do it justice.
No, I think you're quite right, Martin. That, you know, if you take the growth of human resources departments, Britain's productivity crisis can easily be partly laid at the door of that massive expansion that both Britain and America have been through. So the economic problems that we face are very strongly linked, not necessarily in the public mind just yet, with the rise of wokeism. There's no doubt about it. And particularly striking at a corporate level. Just today in the Financial Times, they have a front-page story saying that quoting BlackRock, the $9.2 trillion investment bank and all the rest of it, saying that if you employ more women on the board, you will have a 2% higher increase in your return on assets, right? So there we have a justification by a very, very capitalistic enterprise of the whole woke project. And they even say that, you know, if you've got enough XX chromosomes, you know, you can trace a correlation of more profitability. That's extremely damaging to any attempt to bring more wealth to society. To imagine that just because you're a woman with the right female equipment, that will solve an economic crisis. Great mistake, and people will wake up to this.
Yeah, and I think we're speaking to the Shadow Education Secretary later on in the show, and we would like to ask her about things, for example, like Keir Starmer yesterday was photographed with a poppy, and then he went to a mosque and he removed his poppy.
Yeah.
Now, you could say that's a culture war issue, but I would say that's an issue that says, you know, do you actually care about British values, but only when it suits you? And I think people are deeply bothered about things like this, Fraser, and to sweep them to one side, I think is unfair.
Yeah, and well, you've brought up the Shadow Education Secretary. Schools is where this really matters, and actually where you can see it matters to voters. I mean, in America, what has been going on in schools has changed the outcome of elections. So, you know, when people find out that, you know, their children are being taught that, you know, there are 1,000 genders or whatever it might be, or being taught that all children have white privilege, or these kinds of things do, when voters find out about it, you know, there's a concerted effort for voters not to find out about it, but when people do find out, they get very upset about it, and it can change how they feel politically.
It's so divisive as well, isn't it?
It is, but I think we have to talk about it because these are the issues of our time. Another one, bit of fun to end on, shall we, is Free Woolly. Our daily start.
Martin.
Well, it is a bit of fun.
Poor sheep's been stuck for 2 years by itself. How would you like to be stuck for 2 years by yourself?
A lot of people would like to stick in an island by myself for 2 years.
He's not a sheep.
You said it.
That's not a sheep.
But
no, sheep like company, don't they? Flocks of sheep. Sheep do not like. They're not solitary creatures. And they've been trying to work out a way, haven't they, to rescue Woolly.
Yeah.
And they think they might have finally worked out the solution, which delights me. Although it doesn't delight me, because he might end up getting slaughtered now. He'd probably have a greater chance of staying alive by staying at the bottom of the cliff.
Yeah, because she's actually safe where she is, even though she's on her own. She's not got... she's grazing, she's got access to water, but people are worried that she's lonely. So they've landed on a hovercraft as a solution to save Woolly, because they couldn't go by boat because there's too many rocks.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be possible to arrive that way. But a hovercraft can skate over the rocks. So it's going to be a 6-person mission. They're going to have a vet on board. And then, as you say, at the end, probably the sheep will have to be killed anyway. Because
I'm hoping, I do hope, actually, and maybe someone can let us know, I hope there's an animal sanctuary that will actually take Wooly in after all this rescue effort.
Well, the funny thing about this
She
is
needs to live a nice long life with company.
the story's been running all week. People have been captivated by the story, James. I think it's kind of just touched us in a way, you know, maybe during a world of chaos. This is something we can gravitate towards. But we did speak to a Welsh sheep farmer, and he said the funniest thing. He said sheep are the most suicidal animals on the planet. That's what he said. You know, they'd literally jump off cliffs for no reason because they just do because they're sheep. He reckons this
They just do
that's what he
because they're
said.
sheep.
And he reckons this one jumped off basically and ended up on its own. Apparently, it's very well fed. There's loads of grazing material. It will live a long and prosperous life, as you said, longer than if it's available to go to the old chop block.
Needs a bit of a shear.
Yeah.
For me, the interesting thing about this is whatever, because I forecast innovation above all, is whatever happened to the hovercraft.
Yeah.
There's only one scheduled service in the world, and that's to the Isle of Wight. And the reason is that the fuel has got much more expensive, and the neoprene skirts, which is a sort of synthetic rubber, needed repair or replacement after every trip. But that was then, you know, when Christopher Cockerell, brilliant British inventor, devised the whole principle. And I'm hoping in the future, not just to avoid rocks, as Fraser says, we can get back to hovercraft, cheaper, with different kinds of fuel, with a better skirt.
I used to take
more
the
innovation
hovercraft.
in skirts, that's what I say.
Well, steady on, it's a bit early. But I used to take the hovercraft from Dover to Calais. I used to go on. You used to be able to drive your car on a hovercraft and go over. And it was like,
How long did it take?
It was about 25 minutes. It was thunderously noisy. It lifted you up. It was an amazing experience. So why did they stop it?
Well, for the reasons I expressed,
pricey.
you know, yeah. But the thing is, just because an innovation didn't work in the past doesn't mean it can't be re-examined. You know, if we counted all the engineers who have said in their life, "Oh, we tried that, it doesn't work," you know, it's a great mistake because we've got new plastics, we've got new synthetic fuels as well, synthetic ones. So there's a lot that could be going for hovercraft.
OK, James and Fraser, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much. And now, before all that, here is your weather.
Good morning, it's Alex Burkill here again with your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it won't be anywhere near as stormy as it was yesterday for many of us, there is still some unsettled weather around, particularly across eastern parts of Scotland, northeast England. A deep area of low pressure, that was Ciarán, is now bringing some heavy rain and some strong winds here. We could see some further flooding and disruption to travel given how wet it has been in this area during recent weeks. Also a scattering of showers elsewhere, mainly coming in from the northwest. Some of them could be heavy and thundery, but with sunny spells in between. In the south, we're likely to see highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. Further showers continuing as we go through the evening and overnight. Still, some of them could be heavy. Couldn't rule out some rumbles of thunder, mainly in areas exposed to that northwesterly wind. And then towards the end of the night, some persistent rain and strong winds starting to push into the far southwest. We may see a few mist and fog patches developing further north, and it could be a little chilly where we see any clear skies developing as well. Through Saturday itself then, any mist and fog will clear through the morning, and then this swathe of wet and windy weather spills its way northwards across many parts of England and Wales. Something drier to the north of it, though, some showery rain across the far north of Scotland and heavy showers following in the south, and these could cause some impacts as we go through the afternoon and the evening across southeastern parts. Temperatures similar to today, likely to see highs of around 14 or 15.
Plenty more still to come, including all the latest on Storm Ciarán. We'll also be showing some of your pictures. And do get in touch with your views this morning. You're hearing enough from us. We want to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.com. Stay with us.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
And top of the morning, it's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 3rd of November. Today, the second named storm in 2 weeks brings more hurricane-force winds, heavy rainfall and flooding. But Storm Ciarán isn't done with us yet.
Good morning. Storm Ciarán has now moved away, but we still have warnings out as some further flooding and other disruption is likely. I'll have more shortly.
The Channel Islands were worst hit. Many schools across the south of England have closed too, and some are in the clean-up phase, whereas for others, the storm has just begun. We'll be hearing your stories.
As you can see in the background, there's still a lot of heavy rain in the sky, but generally the winds are just starting to ease off. Fortunately, I was pretty lucky, as you can see in the background. Just a load of fence panels down, so I count myself very lucky.
Escape from Gaza as hundreds more foreign nationals and the seriously injured are able to cross the border into Egypt as Israel claims their troops are at the height of battle against Hamas. Mark White has all the latest from Tel Aviv.
Well, as the sound of explosions continues to be heard over northern Gaza, the Israeli military have confirmed that they have now encircled Gaza City and they're about to enter the next phase of the ground war.
And just how did Charles and Camilla go down in Kenya? We'll take a look back at their first state visit as King and Queen.
And as usual, Paul Coit has all your sport.
Storm clouds still above Old Trafford, though. Eric Ten Hag, is he in trouble? We'll see. Also, the first round, it's the magic of the FA Cup. That begins tonight.
Marvellous stuff. I'm Martin Daubney.
I'm Pip Thompson, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Okay,
Storm
welcome back.
Ciarán, yes. Apologies. Storm Ciarán has swept across the British Isles and the Channel Islands, leaving roofs torn off homes and cars, smashed by golf ball-sized hailstones.
Yeah, gusts of up to 100 miles an hour were recorded yesterday, and almost 20,000 homes and businesses across the UK were without power at lunchtime.
Train services were disrupted across southwest England with heavy flooding and trampolines on the track. Planes, look at this, were forced to go around as they struggled to land safely during heavy winds.
And the Met Office says it will continue to impact Scotland and parts of northern England, but strong winds will gradually ease throughout today.
Joining us now is Jim Dale, Senior Meteorologist at British Weather Services. Good to see you, Jim.
Good morning.
Is it going to get easier for people today, then? What can we expect?
Yeah, I think everything's starting to move away now. So the last embers of Ciarán. I'm going to stop at that point. Is it Ciarán or Ciarán?
Ciarán.
Well, I thought... Eamon Holmes knows all about this, and I'm sure he said it was Ciarán.
Yeah, it could be Chevron as well. That's something that meteorologists are putting in there, Storm Chevron. Did you get that?
No.
You see where I'm going? Fossil fuels, all the rest of it.
Oh, I see.
Oh, yeah, you got it.
No.
Storm Chevron.
Ciarán,
anyway,
meanwhile.
Storm Ciarán.
Back on topic.
Yeah, back on topic. Yeah, he is on the way out and going to be replaced by a kind of OK day today. Yeah, there's going to be showers around. The wind's still a little bit raw out there, but it's a pause. We've got another one coming toward. Now, it might not be named Storm Debbie. It may not be named, but the thing about the events of tomorrow is it's more rain than wind. Yeah, there'll be some wind around, especially in the southeast, but it's the rain in the southeast that will be particularly a problem on saturated ground. River levels very high, so down Sussex Way and Kent Way, there's a yellow warning down in those areas, so look out during... It's not bonfire night as such, but I know many people are going to have a bonfire tomorrow, so it's going to be a bit of a damp squib.
And interestingly, this was caused by a huge difference in temperature and air between Canada and America. Huge low pressure ripping in this wind across the southern lip, which tore across Britain. But you were saying earlier, Jim, could have been much worse. We had a bit of a lucky get-off.
Yeah, dodged the bullet, as Pip said earlier as well. We did. And if it had been 100 miles further north, then there would have been... I will use the word chaos, because chaos definitely reigned in Jersey and Guernsey and one or two places on the south coast in Cornwall as well. So chaos, it would have been chaotic. So I think we got a lucky escape. It takes me back to 1987 and the storm of October 1987 when it affected the southeast, and that was carnage, to be honest with you. We got some newspaper headlines. Do you mind if I actually read one or two of these little headlines? Because I know the newspapers pick up on weather quite well. They like to be, you know, on the top of their game. So this one from the Mirror just says Kieran Carnage.
If we're going to hold them up to Canberra 9, we can see them at home.
Kieran Carnage that's from the Mirror. It's a bit wobbly there. The next two won't be so bad. So you've got the Wrath of Kieran. I think that's the Wrath of Khan, isn't it? That's where that one's come from, the film, the Star Trek
dodgy
film.
Pun, yeah, moving on.
And now moving on to the one that you were on about, Storm in a Teacup. What does that mean?
So it's to do with water pressure.
It does, and it means that your kettle was boiling at slightly lower than it normally does, at 98 degrees instead of 100 degrees, because of that infernally low pressure that we saw coming across. And then, of course, we got the sun. I'll say this in the right way, OK?
Yeah, go on.
For port's
Well, that's
sake.
exactly what a lot of people will be concerned about this weekend, is whether they will get to their bonfire
night. And I think look, the rain will go through tomorrow morning in the south and the Midlands, and it'll reach the north in the afternoon. So most bonfires are going to be in the evening time. I think it's a case of showers rather than anything else, dodging the bullets again.
Yep.
And it principally will be in the south rather than the north. So I think most people will get away with it. But I'm not going to count on it. Just take the brolly and your coat, something warm, do the right thing.
Jim, we said that it was the Channel Islands that got the worst of this. I mean, some terrible, terrible damage. Some of our great viewers have sent us videos. Do have a listen and a look at this.
I'm in Jersey, Channel Islands, where the storm passed through us in the early hours of this morning. So between 2, 3, 4 o'clock, winds were reaching up to 104 miles an hour. Caused extensive devastation, particularly in the south of the island. Many residents evacuated throughout the night by the emergency services, who were fairly well stretched. It is only a small island, and yet, as you can see in the background, there's still a lot of heavy rain in the sky. But generally, the winds are just starting to ease off. Fortunately, I was pretty lucky, as you can see in the background, just a load of fence panels down, so I count myself very lucky, unlike many residents.
Here in Guernsey, the intensity of the storm hit us at around 2:30 a.m. and has been continuing to batter the island ever since. We've seen reports of over 70 trees down, and that's probably just the ones reported on main thoroughfares. In Guernsey, we have lots of small roads that they're covered in debris, and the clean-up operation is going to take some time yet. The government made a decision on Tuesday to close all schools, given the intensity that the storm was going to have, and that meant that businesses also made the decision to close today. So pretty much we're in lockdown here in Guernsey.
Broken, gone. Broken, gone for the roofs and the houses.
police cars littering the roads, ambulances, fire engines. I wouldn't be surprised if all the fire engines were out last night. Our next door neighbour, Doris, her house was flooded. My mum and dad were going around there to help them. There's like 2 tons of sand on all our balconies, just being thrown over. Yeah, Jersey is pretty much said to everyone, don't go into work. The majority of us just got the day off, and you can see why, because it was carnage. Everything was just getting blown to the right.
Thank you very much there to Stephen, Jess and Jack, GB News viewers, for sending in that footage. Jim, while we have you here, moving on, you mentioned a storm following Kieran, Storm Debbie it may be called. We've got waterlogged ground. This next one, is it wind, is it rain, and what's going to happen?
It's mostly rain. I'm not sure it will be named. We might have to wait for Debbie, D-E-B-I, along with all the rest of the storms that will turn up. We're just going into... Well, we're in autumn, we're into winter time, so we're bound to get there. By the way, there's no Pip this year. It's Piet when we get to P, and there's no Martin. No Storm Martin.
Has there ever been a Storm Pip?
Probably not. You want to write in, don't you? But M is Minnie when we get there. The next one, Debbie, as we say, and then you can go down the list. We never get to the end of these list, by the way. We're very... Not like hurricanes. I tell you what, so many hurricanes this year, or tropical storms, I should say, they went right almost through the alphabet. But our own storms have only just started. We're number 3, which isn't bad.
I wonder what, like, say, X would be when you got to X and Y. Storm
There's none.
Xavier,
they don't have them.
maybe?
They don't. No, they miss them out for some reason. W.
Storm X-ray.
W.
All right,
Jim, thank you.
But the outlook is...
The outlook is look, for the next couple of weeks, looking forward all that time, it remains mixed. Our eyes are on the charts to see whether or not we get another storm in due course. Not yet. At least there's a little bit of a respite.
OK. Jim Dale, thank you very much for that latest update.
Israel says its forces have completed the encirclement of Gaza City as it continues to strike Hamas militants in populated areas, with a spokesman calling it another significant stage in this war.
And meanwhile, in the south, civilians have continued to pass through the Rafah crossing into Egypt, with the Foreign Office able to confirm a number of British nationals are among them.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Israel for further talks on humanitarian pauses in the fighting.
And our security reporter, Mark White, is in southern Israel with all of the latest. Good morning to you, Mark. So what's the latest on the ground there?
Well, that fighting continues to rage in northern Gaza. We had significant airstrikes throughout yesterday, and that is, again, the situation today, with regular sounds of artillery fire from positions not far from where we are, and strikes. We've got combat jets overhead, almost constantly raining missiles down on Hamas targets in northern Gaza. I'm just going to pop to the side again and just give you a view down into northern Gaza. It's a bit clearer than it was yesterday, so for Ben Davidge, our cameraman, makes things a little bit easier. You can see the area that we're looking at the moment is down towards Beit Hanun, one of the communities north of Gaza City, and there are buildings there that have just been pancaked, others very precariously toppled to one side. Most buildings in the area you're looking at appear to have either been badly damaged or demolished altogether. No parts of northern Gaza at the moment have been, completely devastated. It is like a wasteland in parts. And the Israeli Defense Forces say that they have completed the current phase of their operations in terms of encircling Gaza City, which will then bring about the next important stage, which of course will be to start moving in and to take Hamas on in its stronghold of Gaza City. It's well dug in, not just to the hundreds of miles of tunnel systems there, but also it's well dug in to many of the buildings around Gaza City. And that's why, of course, we regularly get reports of more civilians caught up in the continuing ground war. The Israelis say that they do not target civilians. In fact, just yesterday they've dropped leaflets on a refugee camp, Shati refugee camp in Gaza City, telling people to evacuate that refugee camp as it will be the next target. Well, let's see how many people do evacuate, because sadly it is the case that despite repeated warnings from the Israeli military that an area is about to be targeted, people remain. Many people remain. Either they remain because they feel that they just do not want to cede ground to the Israelis, or the Israelis say that Hamas is preventing many people from leaving as well. And of course, there are people who are just not in a physical condition to move anywhere. So the net result is hundreds of thousands of people still in these areas that you're looking at in northern Gaza. And the death toll is only going to continue to rise, sadly. As far as the IDF are concerned, it's exacting a toll on them, and it will be worse in the hours and days ahead. 23 IDF personnel have now been confirmed dead in the fighting in northern Gaza. And it comes as Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, is heading for the region to carry out shuttle diplomacy again. He's already said that the US stands by Israel and its right to defend itself, but he also says that any democracy has a responsibility to look after civilians. So a warning there of sorts to Israel to try to abide by humanitarian international laws.
Mark, what are the chances today of more British nationals being able to leave? So far, it has seemed just like a trickle passing through the Rafah crossing.
Well, today I think could be a positive day for British nationals. We're told that there are the names of 92 British nationals on a list today of those being permitted to leave across that Gaza border into Egypt, across the Rafah crossing there. So those 92 and 50 other people, Palestinian dual nationals, are expected to be able to leave as well. We have had very few British nationals leaving through the Rafah crossing in the last few days. It's mainly been Americans, actually, that have gone through, and some of the most severely injured have been taken through that crossing in ambulances. But 92 at least are on the list today. Whether they all turn up, we don't know. But that's, according to officials that we're hearing, that's who will be allowed through.
OK, Mark White, thank you for that latest update from southern Israel, looking over the Gaza border there. Fantastic footage. Thank you very much.
Let's take a look at some other stories coming into the newsroom this morning. And the Metropolitan Police has vowed to use all its powers to stop disruption of Remembrance Weekend commemorations amid ongoing pro-Palestinian protest. There are fears the march could disrupt the 2-minute silence, as well as the daytime and evening Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall.
And FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried has been found guilty of stealing from customers of his now bankrupt cryptocurrency exchange in one of the biggest financial frauds on record. Sam Bankman-Fried's conviction marks a significant victory for a broader crackdown on white-collar crime led by Manhattan's top federal prosecutor.
Beatles superfans were the first to get their hands on the historic final single from the band at a special midnight launch event in Liverpool. The track, titled Now and Then, has been sourced from a demo by John Lennon recorded in the late 1970s at his home in New York.
Now, King Charles's 4-day state visit to Kenya concludes today. Despite falling short of making a full apology for atrocities suffered by Kenyans during their struggle for independence from British colonial rule in the 1950s, the visit has been deemed a wide success.
Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker looks back at it.
His Majesty's first Commonwealth visit since secession, full of ancient traditions. Pomp and pageantry was on full display in Nairobi for a ceremonial welcome from President William Ruto. Kenya's celebrating 60 years of independence from Great Britain, and the palace is keen to celebrate the country's shared history and friendship. But Kenya has a painful past.
The wrongdoings of the past are a cause of the greatest sorrow and the deepest regret. There were abhorrent and unjustifiable acts of violence committed against Kenyans as they waged, as you said at the United Nations, a painful struggle for independence and sovereignty.
An estimated 90,000 Kenyans were killed, tortured or injured during their fight for independence, according to the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Some are upset the King did not offer a full apology, but His Majesty did meet privately with relatives of survivors to listen to their concerns. The British government also paid out almost £20 million in 2013 to around 5,000 Kenyans in an out-of-court settlement. But there have been some happier moments too. The Queen helped feed orphaned baby elephants at the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Nairobi, before being joined by King Charles to meet a baby rhino. Conservation is key to these animals' survival, and the royals were highlighting the work Kenyans do to protect them. At the Commonwealth War Graves, the King re-presented medals to an 117-year-old World War II veteran, thought to be one of the oldest men in the world. He also looked to the future, watching the Kenyan military display a mock beach landing in Mombasa, trained by the British Royal Marines. Further up the beach, King Charles also saw coral being replenished and young people supporting beach cleanups, protecting the environment for future generations. Today, the King and Queen finished their state visit to Kenya, with more engagements planned this morning in Mombasa. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Looks superb. Great trip, I thought.
Yeah, and I've actually been to the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Kenya.
Nice.
It's incredible, the work they do. I need to dig out the photos, but yeah, baby elephants and yeah, fantastic.
Something that's been winding you up this week, we were talking about earlier, is Christmas ads. They've already started, haven't they? I think it's way too soon.
They're doing my head in, Martin, already.
Starting too soon, and in fact, one in particular, the Marks and Spencer's one, seems to have offended everybody.
Yeah, the Marks and Spencer's one caused a bit of a stir, and the Morrisons one has just been released. I don't know whether we can show you any of that, but the Morrisons one has got a theme tune. It's all about an oven glove. I suggest you watch it rather than us trying to badly explain it. The subject is an oven glove, but the theme tune, or the music in the advert, isn't even a Christmas song. I think it's Nothing Gonna Stop Us Now by Starship. Anyway, we haven't even done Bonfire Night, and we're already talking Christmas. It's just a bit much. I don't know what you think. Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, and we're going to cover that in Headline Makers later on in this hour. But meanwhile, here's your weather.
Good morning, it's Alex Burkill here again with your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it won't be anywhere near as stormy as it was yesterday for many of us, there is still some unsettled weather around, particularly across eastern parts of Scotland, northeast England. A deep area of low pressure that was Ciarán is now bringing some heavy rain and some strong winds here. We could see some further flooding and disruption to travel given how wet it has been in this area during recent weeks. Also a scattering of showers elsewhere, mainly coming in from the northwest. Some of them could be heavy and thundery, but with sunny spells in between. In the south, we're likely to see highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. Further showers continuing as we go through the evening and overnight. Still, some of them could be heavy. Couldn't rule out some rumbles of thunder, mainly in areas exposed to that northwesterly wind. And then towards the end of the night, some persistent rain and strong winds starting to push into the far southwest. We may see a few mist and fog patches developing further north, and it could be a little chilly where we see any clear skies developing as well. Through Saturday itself then, any mist and fog will clear through the morning, and then this swathe of wet and windy weather spills its way northwards across many parts of England and Wales. Something drier to the north of it, though, some showery rain across the far north of Scotland and heavy showers following in the south, and these could cause some impacts as we go through the afternoon and the evening across southeastern parts. Temperatures similar to today, likely to see highs of around 14 or 15.
It's a little bit better. Not if you're clearing up, though. Now, coming up, we were talking earlier about having dinner on the edge of space.
That's it.
And it kind of got us thinking, we're asking the question, should the UK be investing in space, or should all the money be better spent elsewhere, like down here? We are going to be debating the issue next. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. It's 7:27. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Pip.
I have to be careful about how I turn my neck. I've cricked my neck overnight.
Everybody's neck?
It's awful. I feel like Eamon on a bad day. He won't mind me saying that. He knows I'm having a laugh.
Might do.
Honestly, I think it's because I've just slept on one pillow rather than two. Because aren't you supposed to sleep on two pillows?
I always go for a single pillow.
Or is it just one? I don't know. But
Two pillows
anyway,
on like that
so
one
I'm
night.
feeling like I'm doing that a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes. What are we talking about?
Space.
Space.
Not pillows.
Space. We were talking about space earlier, weren't we? And times are tough. Money is in short supply and inflation is biting into people's livelihoods. But there remains an argument to be had about what sort of things we fund.
Yeah, and this follows the news that the UK Space Agency has agreed a deal with an American company to fund an all-British mission into orbit for research purposes.
So, should we spend more on the final frontier of space, or should we redirect our priorities to rebuilding Britain?
Well, let's speak now to space expert Andy Loud, who wants more space investment, and UKIP leader Neil Hamilton, who thinks we have higher priorities on the ground. Why don't we start with you, Andy? So I know you're obsessed about space. In fact, your enthusiasm knows no bounds. But what do you say to those of us who think, well, how about we can't even build a train to Manchester? Let's get things right on Earth first and spend the wonga on terra firma.
Well, thank you. Good morning. Yeah, I mean, this is a common argument that comes up on this one all the time, but of course we can't not afford to spend money on space research. The technological development alone is what we actually use all the time in our lives to this day. This programme would not go out if it hadn't been for space research, development of satellite technologies. Also, we need the money to be spent to divert resources that we're going to need for this planet, which we can't get from our own planet at the moment because we'll be running out of those, and they're going to be needed from space. We need to protect our planet, asteroid impact and things like that. That's going to happen sooner or later. It will happen, so we need to be able to protect ourselves from there. The medical developments that we've had, which we're doing to keep people alive in space, have come down straight down here for the Earth. The technology that we use in many hospitals now, that's come from space research. So a lot of the material that we actually need to actually survive now actually comes out of space research itself. And we want to get young people involved in sciences and things like that. And space research is actually brilliant for actually attracting young people to do it. The argument, which I think was the premise of what you were saying, is whether the government should spend all the money on it. I think there needs to be a partnership with private sector, which in the real world is actually what actually happens. I mean, you had a great speaker on earlier talking about the hovercraft when that was the old NRDC funding projects like that. And they, for instance, funded the hydrogen fuel cell, which eventually was used on the Apollo program, which got people to the moon. And that would have been a technology which was developed in America after we started it and given back to us. And had we developed that, we wouldn't have the green technology issues we've got now, because we would have actually had technologies available to help us with those things. And therefore, space science is the way to go forward to push our technologies to actually help this planet.
What do you make of that, Neil? I mean, Andy makes some good points there. Space technology is the way to go forward. And also, lots of our daily activities anyway are linked to the space industries. You know, our sat-nav, for example, our GPS watches.
Well, of course, I understand that spending on the science which is involved in space exploration is in itself a good thing, but ultimately it's a question of priorities, isn't it? We have to cut our coat according to our cloth. Because the government made a deliberate decision to tank the economy over COVID, we are now in a terrible financial situation. The government is still borrowing £100 billion a year. Our defence budget has been slashed to below the minimum for our national safety. And for myself, when we look at the state of the world at the minute, what's going on in the Middle East and in Ukraine, where the West is facing an existential threat on many levels, I think our defence budget on the Earth is more important than the technological budget in space. That's simply my point, is that we have better priorities.
But Neil, doesn't space help us solve the problems on Earth, such as, you know, the data from satellites helps us assess disasters and crises?
Well, yes, of course it does. But, you know, the satellite development which has taken place is not entirely due to Britain. I mean, Elon Musk, with his satellites, of course, has had a significant influence upon the conflicts which are going on around the world at the moment. So, of course, satellite technology is important. But our space budget is peanuts compared with, say, the United States. And it's folly to think that we can in any way compete with them. I just say that, you know, our defence of the realm on Earth is a greater priority than the more long-term projects which might come from space exploration.
Yeah, Andy, it's a fair point, isn't it? I mean, we're £2.6 trillion in national debt. The biscuit tin is empty. You talk about an asteroid striking the planet Earth. No doubt they blame Brexit. No doubt they blame you for that, Neil. But I'm joking aside. What about, though, this private-public partnership? Elon Musk is in the country. He has his own space programme, of course. He flies into space for NASA. He spends the money. He does the research. What we need is a billionaire, not our own money to be spent on this.
That's a very naive view, and a view that doesn't actually understand science anyway. The fact that space science, they say, oh, well, satellite, we can't compete. It's not about competing in many respects, especially with the project which you're seeing with the agreement with Axiom. It's about cooperation. And international cooperation in science is far better than anything else. And it's one actual way to try and bring the world together betterly, whereas if you're spending all the money on military all the time, all you're doing is dividing people, which is a real problem. But when you talk about satellite technology, Britain, of course, they're not really part of it. Well, actually, we are. We were part of the satellite development programs right from the 1960s onwards. Private industry has been developing that. The government has actually fed it with feeders. And he actually admitted himself, like Hamilton there, that, it's actually only peanuts for what we spent. Yeah, exactly. It's not very much at all. How much money have they spent on HS2? Is it going to work? Probably not. And they're not getting it going so far. What projects do Britain actually fund, which are a complete waste of time? If you look through it, we're spending vast sums of money, far more on the space program, that is just being drifted away totally. And we can't afford not to be involved in this, because this is really important for our future of humanity and for the future of our country. We do need to develop in these technologies. Otherwise, we will just fall behind. Let's take one simple example. Somebody develops a great piece of technology. I mean, I've been promoting space science now for nearly 50 years, since I was 7 years old. One of the students, which was gone forward, is actually working in the United States. Why did he go to the United States? There was no outlet here to do it. Anything he develops now will be funded by the United States. They will sell it back to Britain, and we'll have to pay more for that. That's not a good way to go. That's not good economics.
OK, Andy Lound and Neil Hamilton.
Actually, I just want to ask Neil. I think I know the answer. But, Neil, would you pay £100,000 to dine on the edge of space?
I don't think so. I think I'm a bit long in the tooth for that kind of thing now. But there was a time when I'd be game for anything, but I think Christine would have things to say if I were to propose something like that.
OK. Yeah, I bet Andy would love to.
Yeah, well, 100 grand to go to
money.
All right, chaps.
Don't we all, Andy? Don't we all?
We're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. That was a superb debate, because now it's time to blast off and go through all the latest sports headlines with GB News Breakfast Sports Banter, Paul Coyte.
I'm a little long in the tooth and short in the pocket, I think is probably what it is.
That's what he meant. Now then, we do have some news of a disaster at Old Trafford.
We do indeed. The thing is, we're saying that there is a disaster. I think it's looming, is what it is. There's trouble at Manchester United. There's no doubt about that. There was 3-0 twice. The talk about Erik ten Hag and the way he deals with his players. He's got superstar players, but he doesn't take any nonsense. A lot of us would look at that and think, well, that's how it should be. You should have a manager that's in charge that puts their foot down and tells them how it's going to be. But unfortunately, these days, it just doesn't really work. So if players decide, you know what, we don't really like this manager, and we don't like, because there are rumours that are coming out of there now, and there's always leaks that are going to come through, that they're not happy. If you've got players that aren't happy, it ain't going to turn around.
If you get a leaky dressing room, it's normally a sign that a club's got a problem. If that discipline's gone to pot, if the players aren't happy, and as you were saying earlier, Pip, how do we get to a point where the players dictate what happens in a club? Like, as you said, Alex Ferguson, Fergie never would have stood for this.
Yeah, but this is life in general. Unfortunately, the way things are now, if you've got a boss, you can only say so much. You've got to be careful about the way you're dealing with people. We're not only the youngsters and millennials, but you've got they're millionaire millennials. So they have the power, and players know that. Players know they have the power, and they can go anywhere.
But a manager then doesn't stand a chance, does he? But how can you manage a team if the players have got more power than you?
Well, you can manage you can manage a team, but it's the way you manage it. Because the thing is, I've asked managers recently, actually, and say, well, how much of it these days is tactical nous and how much of it is man management? And you'll get no less than 50-50 on man management, even more than that. You look at people like Ange Postecoglou that's gone into Spurs. At Tottenham, you've had Antonio Conte, who it just wasn't working. And this is a man that is like very much full of ego. It's my way or the highway. And then sometimes it's just that arm round that will say, Harry Redknapp was very good at that as well, and will get people playing, because the happier you are, then the more you're likely to react to it.
The big question is, can he last this out? Is he a dead man walking? Will he win the sack race? Is that time of year already?
Well, I'm looking at the time. It's 7:37, so I think probably by about 8:15, I think he may last until then. They're playing Fulham tomorrow. It's 12:30 kick-off tomorrow. It's the lunchtime kick-off. If Manchester United lose to Fulham, they've got to play Copenhagen, which is a huge game in the Champions League. If they lose that, and then it's Luton. Who knows? But I personally cannot see it lasting because you can't turn this thing around unless you have the respect of who you're working for, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
Yep.
Quick word about tennis,
Yes.
Paul. What's going on at the Paris Masters? A player
Yes, Yannick Sinner.
packing in the match. I don't blame him. It was almost 3 a.m.
Yeah, Yannick Sinner. We've seen this in the Australian Open. We've seen it other... See, the thing is, with Wimbledon, there's an 11 o'clock curfew, which means games can only go on until 11. But when you've got indoor tournaments like the Paris Masters, they can go on as long as the game goes on. So if you've got a 5-set match, you go on at 7 or 8 in the evening. 4 or 5 hours sometimes these games go on. So 2:37, Yannick Sinner won his game, and then he was expected to be on court 5 o'clock the next afternoon, so about 14 hours later. And then I think it was about half an hour before he was about to go out and just said, you know what? I'm too tired. I can't do this.
Well,
blame him.
And then he just said, that's it. No.
There'll be a lot of people out there now who've been up for a few hours doing a real day's work.
Oh, now, come on. I'm not having that.
Some fella moaning about playing tennis.
5 hours playing tennis. Now, come on.
How fit you have to be to do it? My God,
No, I don't.
I'm so exercised about this.
Playing tennis
My
isn't a
voice is
real
going to
job.
break.
I'll tell you what, you take
try
it from
being
this
a
side,
milkman.
I'll take it from the other side. Absolute nonsense.
Cry me a river.
Absolute
Tennis isn't a real
nonsense.
job.
How many miles do tennis players cover in a game?
Oh, I have no idea.
5-set
If
match.
you think every point, this is the longest time probably any single person will play a sports match.
Yeah,
so
Martin
then to go and
Daubney.
play after
Listen
that.
to Paul.
We'll play 5 sets to 2:37 tonight. We'll have another go at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll see how we go, Martin.
OK, new balls, please. That's what I need. Thank you very much, Paul Coyte. OK, coming up, Elon Musk says AI will eventually make all jobs obsolete. We'll be discussing this in Headline Makers. This is GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
It's your new
t-shirt.
t-shirt. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Pip.
And yours now to go through some of the day's headlines is the Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and the forecaster and author, James Woodhousen. So before we get going, here's a clip of Elon Musk and Rishi Sunak's conversation on AI, because we're about to talk about AI. Let's watch this.
Would your kind of observation be on AI and the impact on labour markets and people's jobs and how they should feel about that as they think about this?
Well, I think we are seeing the most disruptive force in history here. You know, where we have for the first time, we will have for the first time something that is smarter than the smartest human. And that, I mean, it's hard to say exactly what that moment is, but there will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want to have a job for sort of personal satisfaction, but the AI will be able to do everything. So I don't know if that makes people comfortable or uncomfortable. You know, that's why I say if you wish for a magic genie, that gives you any wishes you want, and there's no limit. You don't have this three wish limit nonsense. You just have as many wishes as you want. So it's both good and bad. One of the challenges in the future will be how do we.
OK, of course, that was Elon Musk in conversation with Rishi Sunak. That was off the back of
Jeremy Paxman, wasn't he, Rishi Sunak?
It was, yeah. That was off the back of the AI summit, the global summit at Bletchley Park. So let's talk about this, James. You're into futurology, predicting things. Interesting how 1 minute Elon Musk was calling AI anti-human, it will end the world, and now he's saying none of us would have to do any work, we can put our feet up. I mean, make your mind up, lads.
Well, the truth is somewhere in between, and I think people should really stop worrying about it to the degree that Elon Musk is doing, saying there will be no jobs at all. It's just ridiculous. Rishi Sunak, far too gullible, not at all like Jeremy Paxman in really interrogating this nonsense.
I know, it was a joke. I wasn't being serious.
I got it, but, you know, I wish Jeremy Paxman had been there, you know. Just nearly 40 years ago, I published this book with the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the main lesson that I conveyed about robots, which Musk is talking about, is that there'll be a long time coming. And I've got to ask Elon Musk or you, Pip, have you ever seen a robot take somebody's job, actually tuck himself under a desk?
I've worked with a few robots over the years, James.
That's right. Well, it's always easier to turn a man into a robot or a woman than a robot into a human being.
So when you say it's all nonsense, what Musk was saying, are you saying it's too far ahead? It could happen, but way, 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 way ahead when we're...
No, I don't think it can happen at all. You see, what people miss about AI is that we are human bodies. You know, I'm attracted to you. Do robots feel that kind of feeling? Have they got spiritual judgment? Have they got aesthetic judgment? Have they got political judgment?
It's not that kind of show. We're not a dating show. This is the breakfast show. Stick to the story.
In the morning.
Just a gag. I was joking. No, I better not say that. But anyway, the point is they lack our faculties. Above all, particularly right now with what's happening in Gaza and everything else, they lack moral judgment. Robots and AI can only reflect the programmer, and they don't have any independent will.
Now, that's a great point, because Fraser, Rishi Sunak, God bless his cotton socks. Yeah. He's been trying to switch us all onto AI and get us excited about it for ages. It's obviously a hobby horse of his, but people tend to glaze over a bit because they don't see how it relates to them. On the one hand, it's going to end the planet. The next thing is endless leisure time. What people really care about is it going to get rid of their job? Now, who will it replace? And I'm really passionate about making sure, particularly the working classes, you know, aren't always shafted by this new technology and just replaced by automation. How can we take care of ourselves? What kind of jobs are going to be safe?
Well, I think what's interesting about AI is that it has the potential to, I don't know, replace a lot of more middle-class jobs.
Yeah.
It's actually some of the sort of data work, things like that. Accountants. That's what the fear is. I mean, but we shouldn't exaggerate how good the technology is as well. I think that's a lot of people are getting ahead of themselves in this. I mean, so the AI has asked ChatGPT to write a report. And I can tell you it's not going to replace journalism anytime soon. So it says, for instance, imagine the riot of colours on that brisk morning. The dawn painting the sky in hues of pink and orange as delegates from over 50 countries representing a mosaic of cultures arrived. Now, that's not going to replace their journalists anytime soon because it doesn't have, as James was saying, human judgment. It doesn't have the ability to say, that's a bit much, isn't it? You know, that's
it sounds like a human, a student that swallowed a dictionary is maybe on drugs.
Well, that's precisely what it's like, because if you and actually the technical term for what AI often does is hallucinate. So it can make up facts.
So it is hallucinating.
It is hallucinating.
Yeah.
It genuinely, and that's what the tech people call it.
Once you get past how impressive the technology is, it actually would make the world quite boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because there'll be no personalities anymore.
Well, this is right. Emotions are entirely foreign to the world of electrons. You know, what we've got to understand is that people learn from physical contact. They learn from making love. They learn from yoga or whatever it is. And a machine can't do that. You know, it just lacks everything that we've got. So can we stop the panic? Can we stop the mad euphoria as well? You know, in fact, there's just been a survey showing that the middle class is working longer hours and for longer than ever before because they're squeezed. So, you know, Fraser's right. The threat to jobs will be, insofar as it exists, will be to administrative jobs. But remember, we heard all about the threat to jobs 10 years ago from the Oxford Institute, and nothing's happened. What the story has been is labour utilisation, more immigration, longer hours. That's been the story.
Well, actually, when I was a lad, we were told that robots would be making cocktails, washing our cars and sorting our lives out. None of that's happening.
Yeah, where is it? We deserve it, actually. I
Bring
think
it on.
One thing that obviously Sunak is too dim to notice, but there is a reason why Musk is, you know, peddling this line.
He wants the contract.
That it's super powerful, because it bigs up his company, but also super dangerous, because actually it's the tech people that want new regulations to come in. The incumbent tech firms are desperate for there to be regulation so that it can basically kill any other sort of start-up firms at birth. They're using it to create an oligopoly for themselves.
All right, let's lighten the mood a bit, because one thing we were talking about earlier on was Christmas ads. Yeah, they're already here. The day after blooming Halloween they came out. I think we've got a few to show you here. Let's have a look.
Now, I think this one is the new Morrison's one, and you can see it's all about an oven glove.
It's a talking oven glove.
Singing oven glove. It's singing Nothing's Going to Stop Us Now.
Exactly. So, first of all, I don't know why it's not Christmas music. But I suspect this Morrison's advert... Oh, no, this is the M&S one.
That's Dawn French.
The Morrison's advert is probably going to be less divisive than the M&S one. But come on, gentlemen, what do you think? Is it too early to be talking about Christmas, seeing everything about Christmas, listening to Christmas music on the radio? I mean, we haven't had Bonfire Night yet. James?
Well, can't they be a bit more innovative? You know, just this morning to get to you at crack of dawn, I saw Jupiter, because I love astronomy, and it's really, really bright. Now, the story goes that the star of Bethlehem was actually Jupiter at 4 AD. And, you know, it doesn't cast shadows like Venus does. But a story about that in a commercial, you know, investigating that, would be so much more interesting. Why do they have to dumb it? Well, it is to do with Christmas. It's to do with the Magi.
The Star of Bethlehem was made up, it was Jupiter. That might put a dampener on the proceedings.
Yeah, but at least it might excite interest more than an oven glove.
Let's talk,
Fraser. It might make us fall asleep, but...
Fraser, let's talk about the M&S one? It's
Yeah,
got people
yeah.
going. So if you haven't seen it, 3 Christmas hats thrown on a fire, red, white and green, and of course people were offended by that.
Yeah, I mean, the advert's offended everyone, actually, because the premise of the advert is sort of do your own Christmas.
Yeah.
You know, do ignore what your family wants, ignore tradition. So there are some people who are upset about that. And then other people are upset about this unfortunate scene in which these, Christmas hats are thrown into the fire, and they happen to line up exactly in the way that the Palestinian flag does. Now, so people have taken this as, nutters have taken this as a symbol of, M&S's support for the IDF in Israel and the Israeli bombing campaign against Gaza, even though this was filmed in August.
And
there's a dark side to that because people accuse M&S of being a Jewish shop, because it was founded by a Jewish person, and there have been protests outside M&S unrelated to the advert.
OK,
in relation to
we have to leave it there for the moment. And it's worth pointing out it's also the colour of the Welsh flag, and none of the Welsh complained about it, did they? But look, that's the funny old world we live in. Stick with us, lads, because we're going to show you the weather first, and then come back to you.
Good morning, it's Alex Burkill here again with your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it won't be anywhere near as stormy as it was yesterday for many of us, there is still some unsettled weather around, particularly across eastern parts of Scotland, northeast England. A deep area of low pressure, that was Ciarán, is now bringing some heavy rain and some strong winds here. We could see some further flooding and disruption to travel given how wet it has been in this area during recent weeks. Also a scattering of showers elsewhere, mainly coming in from the northwest. Some of them could be heavy and thundery, but with sunny spells in between. In the south, we're likely to see highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. Further showers continuing as we go through the evening and overnight. Still, some of them could be heavy. Couldn't rule out some rumbles of thunder, mainly in areas exposed to that northwesterly wind. And then towards the end of the night, some persistent rain and strong winds starting to push into the far southwest. We may see a few mist and fog patches developing further north, and it could be a little chilly where we see any clear skies developing as well. Through Saturday itself then, any mist and fog will clear through the morning, and then this swathe of wet and windy weather spills its way northwards across many parts of England and Wales. Something drier to the north of it, though, some showery rain across the far north of Scotland and heavy showers following in the south, and these could cause some impacts as we go through the afternoon and the evening across southeastern parts. Temperatures similar to today, likely to see highs of around 14 or 15.
We will be talking about Storm Ciarán shortly and asking whether it could spoil our weekend with bonfire nights getting cancelled. There are still dozens of flood warnings in place in the south of England. Almost 90 flood warnings and more than 235 flood alerts. So do take care wherever you're heading today.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Friday the 3rd of November. Today, the second named storm in 2 weeks brings more hurricane-force winds, heavy rainfall and flooding. Storm Ciarán.
Good morning. Storm Ciarán has now moved away, but we still have warnings out as some further flooding and other disruption is likely. I'll have more shortly.
The Channel Islands have been worst hit. Many schools across the south of England are also closed today. Some, though, are in the clean-up phase, whereas for others the storm has just begun. We'll be hearing your stories.
As you can see in the background, there's still a lot of heavy rain in the sky, but generally the winds are just starting to ease off. Fortunately, I was pretty lucky, as you can see in the background. Just a load of fence panels down, so I count myself very lucky.
Escape from Gaza, hundreds more foreign nationals and the seriously injured are able to cross the border into Egypt as Israel claims their troops are at the height of battle against Hamas. Mark White has all the latest from southern Israel.
Almost 100 British nationals are believed to be on the list of those who can cross that crossing into Egypt today at Rafah, and we're also told by the Israeli military that they have now begun encircling Gaza City.
And just how did Charles and Camilla go down in Kenya? We'll take a look back at their first state visit as King and Queen with our royal correspondent Cameron Walker.
And as usual, Paul Coit has all your sport.
Yes, I do. Manchester United say they're not looking to replace Erik ten Hag. Well, yet anyway. First round of the FA Cup begins tonight, and also great news for Martin, and that is that men are allowed to take part in synchronised swimming in the Olympics. So how about that for the morning?
I simply cannot wait to pull on my leotard. I'm Martin Daubney.
I'm Pip Thompson. That is a terrifying thought. And this is Breakfast on GB News.
OK, so we asked you earlier in the show about this protest march, so-called million people protest march, pro-Palestinian march, which is due to clash next Saturday with Armistice Day. Many of the papers covering that today. A lot of you very, very cross about the fact that this may coincide with the 2-minute silence, and people have already said they will set out to specifically and deliberately desecrate and break that silence. Pip, what are they saying?
Sarah in Cheshire says, having lost family members in the Great War and my grandfather served in the Middle East during World War II as a medic, I'm incensed at the thought of this most sacred of national and Commonwealth events being totally disrespected.
And Kenneth, straight to the point, agreeing with the Tory MP, put the army on the streets to stop them.
There'll be plenty of police on the streets, I'm sure.
Well, you'd hope so.
Yeah. Janet says, speaking of the police, there will be trouble on Sunday if the police do not police properly. These protesters are pushing their luck.
And Nada echoes what many of you have been saying. Remembrance Day is a British tradition. Pro-Palestinian protesters should not be allowed anywhere near the cenotaph.
We've also getting plenty of views from you about the weather, the clean-up that's underway today after Storm Ciarán. Bev has got in touch saying that the wind down where she lives in Cornwall was utterly horrendous. There are plenty of flood warnings still in place today after Storm Ciarán swept across the British Isles and the Channel Islands. It left roofs torn off homes and cars smashed by golf ball-sized hailstones.
Yeah, gusts up to 100 miles an hour recorded yesterday. Almost 20,000 homes and businesses across the UK were without power at lunchtime.
Train services were disrupted across southwest England with heavy flooding and trampolines on the track. Planes were forced to go around as they struggled to land safely during the heavy winds.
And the Met Office says it will continue to impact Scotland and parts of northern England, but strong winds will gradually ease throughout today.
Well, joining us now is Jess Morgan, and she's a viewer who got in touch with us about the chaos at her house in Guernsey. Jess, good to see you this morning. It sounds like you have had quite a time of it. Tell us what has happened in your neck of the woods.
So, yeah, a very different morning this morning with some blue skies than it was yesterday. I have never known winds like it. So Guernsey was battered from around 2:30 in the morning. My daughter woke up because the noise was so loud and frightening. She has a westerly facing window, so she came in our bed. And then it sort of continued till, around 10 a.m. And then it started to subside a little bit. But I think the authorities definitely made the right decision to close all schools, which then encouraged businesses to close. I mean, all our supermarkets, convenience stores, everything was closed yesterday. And I think that was the right decision, because if people had been going out in the rush hour traffic, then it could have been a different story. We've had over 70 trees down in Guernsey, with most of our main thoroughfares affected. And then, of course, we've got coastal routes and the tide. So it's really been an incredible 24 hours, but now the clean-up operation starts.
And Jess, we've also had footage from viewers Stephen and Jack earlier, echoing those sentiments. Roofs ripped off, windows stoved in, sand flung across from the beaches into gardens. We're seeing footage online now of people being swept off their feet at Dover. That's Pontefract in Pontycrawl there in South Wales, battering in Penzance. The storm has passed you by now. How much of a clean-up operation do you think you have? How long is it going to take? And also, news coming in, maybe following Ciarán, is Storm Debbie. More rain on the way.
Yeah, I mean, you really cannot underestimate Mother Nature. And I think lots of people were downplaying this, although there was panic buying on Wednesday before we essentially locked down yesterday. But while life starts to get to normal today, many of our roads are blocked, lots of debris on the roads, and things still unsafe, because even though some trees haven't fully fallen down, it will just take that tipping point. And with, like you say, strong winds again forecast in our region again from tomorrow. We're already seeing a number of cancellations on fireworks displays, and people being encouraged to once again stay indoors for their own safety.
I think, Jess, that Jersey Airport remains closed today to commercial flights, and the ports of Jersey say they've suffered equipment damage and system failures because of Storm Ciarán.
Yes, I think in Jersey they had, even though you think of us as close together, they had the strongest winds. Their schools are still closed today. Our airport is due to reopen at 10, but I know they are making safety checks to make sure there's no objects or debris on the runway. And I think Jersey are continuing to stay locked down and advising people to stay at home. I know one of the hotels along the front, the Royal Hotel, for anyone that's visited Jersey, was the part of the buildings come down. There are buildings over here down. So, I mean, if you don't have to go out, I think it's still wise not to, whilst the winds are not around, the debris on the roads. And it just seems, again, we're waiting for this next storm. But yeah, Jersey still in lockdown, still flights disrupted, and we'll wait and see what happens next.
Jess, on a slightly brighter note, it does look quite sunny there this morning.
It's so deceptive, so deceptive. It's absolutely beautiful. This is what autumn in, Guernsey and the Channel Islands is. We have beautiful beaches and, lovely scenery. So hopefully the cleanup, I must say, our emergency services, both in Jersey and Guernsey, have been incredible. And the government keeping everyone informed of all the roads and major thoroughfares down. And even yesterday when we went out and about to see what damage had been done, many of the trees that had been out, and we're talking big, heavy trees that have been, around for hundreds of years, were already being cleaned up. So I have to say a great big shout out to the emergency services in Jersey and Guernsey.
OK, Jess, well, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck with the clean-up operation. I know you're a GB News viewer, and I tell you what, that was a fantastic report. I think she's got a future as a weather girl. What do you reckon?
Can we call on you again, Jess, please?
Absolutely, although I hope it's for better news rather than a storm next time.
Yeah, best of luck with you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning on GB News Breakfast. How fabulous was that?
We'll get it back, height of summer, on a beach with an ice cream. Seems a long way off that, though, because joining us now to chat about what is happening, what could still be happening, is Alex Deakin from the Met Office. A very good morning to you. Alex, what can we see then over the weekend? I think there are still weather warnings, aren't there, in place?
Yeah, there are, but the weather over the weekend is going to be not as severe as what we've just seen, thankfully. There is, just to clarify, there is no Storm Debbie at this stage. There is a powerful weather system out in the Atlantic, but it's not expected to bring as damaging gusts at all. So we'll obviously be monitoring, but just to clarify, there is no Storm Debbie at this stage. Storm Ciarán is still around. It's actually out in the North Sea and feeding in showers into eastern Scotland today. So we have one weather warning in across eastern Scotland because of the showers here, but that's mostly because it has been so very wet in eastern Scotland, chiefly because of Storm Babette, the previous storm. So we do have a warning here, and we do have a warning across parts of the southeast at the moment, a yellow warning for Saturday for rain. So the weekend isn't going to be sunny skies and calm, far from it. There will be spells of wet and windy weather, but just more typical autumn fare. The problem is the ground is saturated, so any extra rainfall has the potential to cause further flooding. But no stormy weather, nothing as violent as Storm Ciarán in the outlook, but the weather just stays a bit mixed, a more typical autumn outlook, if you like.
And Alex, we were speaking to Jim Dale earlier on, and as we understand it, we had a bit of a lucky escape because if Ciarán had been like 100 miles further north, instead of whipping around across that southern tail and through the Channel Islands, it would have been comparable, he said, to the Great Storm.
Yeah, we were pretty lucky with the exact position. Obviously, the worst the conditions on its southern flank, and we were really pinpointing that area as being the area for the most damaging gusts. The storm didn't really intensify until just before it hit, really, kind of 24 hours before it hit, and that's when you really nailed down the exact track. So the fact that we named this storm on Sunday, we always saw that it had the potential to develop, but until it actually develops and spins up, it's really hard to nail down the exact position. That's why we had those amber warnings in place across the south, where we did see gusts of 60, 70, close to 80 miles an hour. But the really strong winds, as you say, weren't far away, just a little further south, obviously devastating parts of the Channel Islands and with fatal consequences across parts of Europe as well. So, yeah, it was a pretty lucky escape in some ways.
A very minor point, Alex, but is it Ciarán? I heard Eamon talking about this yesterday, and nobody seems to know. I mean, not that it really matters in the grand scheme of things.
Well, the reason we name storms is to get people's attention, so people do take notice, and thankfully that is what's happened. It has caused a little bit of debate, but it's Ciarán, because of that. There's an accent on the A. If there wasn't an accent there, it would just be Ciarán, yeah. So, but because of that accent, it makes it an orn sound. So it's Ciarán is the actual official definition.
Alex, quickly looking ahead, of course, it's bonfire night this weekend. What's the outlook there? Which part of the countries might struggle to get their embers going?
Yeah, I mean, where I live, Ottery St Mary, have a big celebration down here, and there was photos on social media yesterday of this huge bonfire, and it was basically an island. because it was just surrounded by water because it's set up right next to the River Otter. So, yeah, it is going to be a bit of a struggle. There are going to be some very soggy bonfires, but just keep up to date with the warning because obviously there's celebrations sometimes Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday. So, yeah, just keep across the forecast and keep up to date. But there will be some heavy showers around. There will be some gusty winds as well. But as I said, thankfully, not as severe as from Storm Ciarán.
Yeah. And we've got to be really careful. Thank you very much, Alex Deacon, for joining us there. And just a quick warning, don't do what I did years ago and try and get a soggy bonfire going with a gallon of 4-star. It's never a good idea. Don't do that. Hey, Alex, echo that sentiment.
Absolutely not. And also check your bonfires for hedgehogs. I just wanted to say that as well.
Yeah, beautiful.
Are you doing the bonfire this year?
I'm going to an organised one. Yeah,
that's probably a very good idea, Martin.
Yeah.
After what you just said.
Yeah, that's right. I don't want to burn down the neighbour's fence. Yeah, I've done that before as well. We should stop talking about my bonfires. They haven't been a great success. Yeah, let's move on.
Israel says its forces have completed the encirclement of Gaza City as it continues to strike Hamas militants in populated areas, with a spokesman calling it another significant stage in this war.
Yeah, meanwhile, in the south, around 92 British dual nationals have been permitted to cross the Rafah crossing in Egypt today, with the in-laws of Scotland's First Minister among them.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Israel for further talks on humanitarian pauses in the fighting.
And our security reporter, Mark White, is in southern Israel with all the latest. Hello to you again, Mark. We had some dramatic footage you had us earlier on, crossing over into Gaza there, of a flattened landscape. What's the latest?
Well, those explosions are still continuing, with ground troops who are really pushing down into northern Gaza. And what they're doing is they're encountering pockets of Hamas resistance. They're well dug in. They're dug into buildings. They're in the landscape, popping up from tunnels behind hillsides and alike. And they're firing off, according to the Israelis, anti-tank missiles and also RPGs. They're also firing off machine guns, lobbing grenades. It really is close-in fighting, with one Israeli spokesman saying that some Hamas fighters have even been as close as to get on and try to clamber up the side of tanks. So it's clearly a very bloody, painful process for the Israelis trying to push forward. We know that so far the Israelis have confirmed that 23 of their troops have been killed in the fightings. They say that dozens of Hamas fighters have been killed. I'll step to the side again, give you that look once more down into Gaza itself. And where you're looking at is Beit Hanun. You may be able to see some smoke that's just rising above a treetop there. That is from a strike just about a minute before you came to us. But these strikes are constant. We're hearing artillery fire. There are artillery emplacements not far from where we are. There's tank fire that's going out from this position as well. And there are combat jets constantly in the skies above, and drones as well. And when they are called in by the ground troops and they're given a position, a grid reference, then soon after you hear the explosions. What normally happens is you'll hear small arms fire, machine gun fire, and then about a minute later there'll be the boom of the artillery here as those shells are lobbed over to the positions that have been called in by the ground troops. Interestingly, in terms of those soldiers pushing south, these soldiers in what you're looking at the moment is Beit Hanun, which is north of Gaza City. There are other soldiers further south encircling now, according to the IDF, Gaza City. And they are ready, they say, for the next stage, the next important stage. And that next stage will be trying to take on Hamas in its stronghold, in that very built-up city that even now, when many of the residents have moved out of there, as per the instructions of the Israeli military, hundreds of thousands have still chosen to stay. So there will be significant civilian losses. There is no doubt about that as they push forward. And it will be difficult, street to street, door to door fighting And then eventually, at some point, they've got to go down into those tunnels as well, where we know that many of the hostages are being held.
Mark, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has now arrived back in Israel, his second visit since the terrorist attack on October the 7th. What is going to be his focus? He is meeting Benjamin Netanyahu again, isn't he?
Yes, and after Benjamin Netanyahu, he will be going to a number of other countries in this area, shuttle diplomacy, really. What he is going to be saying, obviously, in meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, he will be bringing that continued commitment of the United States to support Israel in this ground war. Israel has a right to defend itself, is the stated US position, but he will also be taking with him the instructions and the belief of the US President Joe Biden that there should be humanitarian pauses to allow more in the way of aid trucks in and to allow more people out, those foreign nationals and dual nationals out over the Gaza border through that Rafah crossing into Egypt. Antony Blinken said just before he boarded this flight for Israel, he's now touched down, that while the US supports Israel in its right to defend itself, as a democracy, Israel also has the responsibility of looking after civilians.
OK, Mark White, thank you for joining us live from southern Israel. Dramatic footage there from the Gazan border. You could see there the smoke going up, the landscape flattened by incessant bombing, very much a live war zone there.
Now, King Charles's four-day state visit to Kenya concludes today. Despite falling short of making a full apology for atrocities suffered by Kenyans during their struggle for independence from British colonial rule, the visit has been deemed a success.
Yeah, now, Royal correspondent Cameron Walker joins us now in the studio. Good morning to you, Cameron. It's been rather a success, hasn't it? I mean, there have been a lot of critics saying there should be a full apology for atrocities committed in the 1950s, but on the whole, it's gone swimmingly.
I think on the whole, most people would say that is the case. I mean, if you're comparing it to the Prince and Princess of Wales's Caribbean tour back in 2022, it's definitely been less overshadowed than that one. Yes, the King did not apologise for past atrocities with the Mau Mau uprising 60 years ago, but on Wednesday afternoon, he did meet with relatives of those who were caught up in that atrocity, including the great-grandson of a tribal leader who was executed by a British ruler in 1905. And he got the chance to tell King Charles exactly what happened to his relatives and those around him, along with a number of other people caught up in that atrocities. Now, Ambrose Terrace, who is the great-grandson, said that the meeting was cordial and he appreciated the chance to explain the injustices against his ancestors, and also said that it's certainly progress. Now, as far as the British government's concerned, they are not going to apologise for something committed 60 years ago, as we understand it, but look at all the other engagements both the King and Queen has done. Conservation yesterday, these wonderful pictures, 2 days ago, of the Queen feeding a baby elephant, and the King down, we were talking yesterday, weren't we, Martin, about the King putting bits of coral on a small coral reef to then be put into the ocean, replenishing the coral, increasing the tourism and attracting tourists as well. We're just seeing pictures now of Queen Camilla feeding the baby elephant, a 1.5-year-old called Mazinga at the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust Elephant Orphanage. And it's all about strengthening relations between two nations, Kenya and Great Britain.
I know we're saying it's been deemed a success. Do we know how the media in Kenya have been reporting it? Do they concur with that?
I think it's a mixed bag, to be honest. I think in terms of the engagements the King has been doing with young people in particular, so, for example, he went to a tech summit where he was looking at opportunities for young people. Kenya at the moment, huge unemployment problem for young people, and it's the King shining a spotlight on that and also shining a spotlight on the opportunities. So the question for the Kenyan media, at least, was, is this really going to benefit ordinary Kenyans, the fact that the King of the United Kingdom is coming to visit? So that's still up in the air. But there certainly has been still talk of those communities who are upset, who are directly affected by the Mau Mau atrocities of 1960. So it's certainly mixed.
Cameron, today's the final day. What can we expect for the final hurrah of the trip?
Well, we are expecting the King to visit the Mombasa Memorial Cathedral. We're just waiting on the King to arrive, actually. We do have live pictures from inside the cathedral. He's sitting with a group called the Coast Interfaith Council of Clerics, and the King, for all his life, really, has been really trying to create interfaith dialogue and harmony between different religions, so Christianity, Hindu, Muslim and African traditional faiths as well, all about peace building and countering violent extremism. We know Al-Shabaab is a big problem in that area of East Africa. It was only 10 years ago that horrific terrorist attack at the the Westgate shopping centre in 2013, leaving 71 dead. So it's all about trying to counteract that kind of thing, and the King is shining a light on that today.
And we saw the British Royal Commandos training some of the Kenyan forces to help them resist a coastal invasion the other day, and that was marvellous too. That military connection, that intelligence connection, that conservation connection. I know there have been some shadows over this trip, but on the grand scheme of things, what with this and France, I think that the Royals have got off to a corker.
Certainly, and Germany as well. I think it's been 3 successful visits for the King so far. The King, Captain General of the Royal Marines training those Kenyan special forces, taking part in that mock beach landing yesterday. Great pictures, but also showing the harmony and the collaboration between Britain and Kenya.
Good. Cameron Walker, thank you. Excellent stuff.
Dozens of flood warnings still in place in the aftermath of Storm Ciarán. Not Kieran, Ciarán. Here is the weather forecast coming up.
Good morning, it's Alex Burkill here again with your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it won't be anywhere near as stormy as it was yesterday for many of us, there is still some unsettled weather around, particularly across eastern parts of Scotland, northeast England. A deep area of low pressure, that was Ciarán, is now bringing some heavy rain and some strong winds here. We could see some further flooding and disruption to travel given how wet it has been in this area during recent weeks. Also a scattering of showers elsewhere, mainly coming in from the northwest. Some of them could be heavy and thundery, but with sunny spells in between. In the south, we're likely to see highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. Further showers continuing as we go through the evening and overnight. Still, some of them could be heavy. Couldn't rule out some rumbles of thunder, mainly in areas exposed to that northwesterly wind. And then towards the end of the night, some persistent rain and strong winds starting to push into the far southwest. We may see a few mist and fog patches developing further north, and it could be a little chilly where we see any clear skies developing as well. Through Saturday itself then, any mist and fog will clear through the morning, and then this swathe of wet and windy weather spills its way northwards across many parts of England and Wales. Something drier to the north of it, though, some showery rain across the far north of Scotland and heavy showers following in the south, and these could cause some impacts as we go through the afternoon and the evening across southeastern parts. Temperatures similar to today, likely to see highs of around 14 or 15.
Well, that's your forecast. But Pip, I'll tell you, you've caused a storm yourself about how Storm Ciarán, they said at the Met Office Ciarán is pronounced.
Alex Deakin from the Met Office said, and he was very clear that it was Ciarán, but now we're getting people contacting us saying that it's Ciarán, named after Kieran Fearon, I'm told.
Is that a real name?
A civil servant from Northern Ireland, yeah.
I've got plenty of Irish mates, and they're all called Ciarán, not Ciarán.
Well, grand scheme of things, it's trivial, isn't it?
Anyway, let's go to the break. Coming up, we're speaking to Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. Stay with us. This is GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Pip.
Now, ahead of Tuesday's King's Speech, Labour are calling for an ambitious plan for growth to stop what it says are years of stagnation. Well, let's speak now to the Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. Hello to you, Bridget. Always a pleasure. Before we get to Starmer's big bill, could I ask you something we've been talking about a lot on the show this morning, and that is this proposed pro-Palestinian march. They're calling it the Million People March, set for Armistice Day in London. News in that a lot of Labour voters, or from Labour seats, are being shipped in from places like Batley and Leicester. And the controversy, of course, is if they desecrate the 2-minute silence. Would you like to ask those people to respectfully not do that and observe British tradition?
Hello, good morning. I haven't seen the details of what's being proposed, but Remembrance Sunday is a very important national moment where we have the opportunity to remember all of those who've fallen in the service of our country. I do so every year. My granddad served in the RAF in the East. It's an incredibly important moment for us all, and I wouldn't want to see any disruption to that important commemoration.
That's good to hear. But it needs to be echoed. Tory MPs today are saying we should send in the army to stop something like that happen. What would you like to see happen? We can't have a situation, can we, where the Palestinian confrontation, the war in Israel is coming to the streets of Britain. It's causing huge unrest. And the fact of the matter is, this is the problem that's dividing the Labour Party. 350 councillors now demanding Keir Starmer asks for an immediate ceasefire. And I want to ask you, why the Labour Party so obsessed with Palestinian politics when within those seats I mentioned, places like Batley, the grammar school teacher is still in hiding 2.5 years later, yet the Labour Party don't seem to really care about things like that?
I understand and recognise the strength of feeling that people have. We all want to see the release of hostages that are being held. We all want to see humanitarian aid getting into Gaza as quickly as possible. It's impossible not to be moved by the horrific scenes that we see every day on our television screens of children and families suffering. And that's true in Israel and it's true in Gaza. That's why the only long-term answer is for a political solution in the shape of a secure Israel with the right to defend itself alongside a viable Palestinian state. And the US are a key player in this. And I do welcome the visit today of the Secretary of State Blinken to Israel. They will be important in making sure we move progress along on that, because it has been a failure of the international community to get us to that position.
This issue is causing growing problems, though, within the Labour Party, isn't it? I mean, that Labour Party conference of yours, not that long ago, but it seems a very long time ago now with what seems to be happening.
As I say, I do understand how strongly people feel about this, and it's right that people have the opportunity to express their views, but our focus has to be the ongoing tragedy that we see unfolding in terms of the military action in the Middle East. And we all want to see humanitarian pauses so that aid can get in. I want to see hostages released, and I want to see that aid getting in to support children who should not be getting caught up in this in the way that we're seeing. Of course, we want that to happen, but it's about the suffering that we're seeing. It's not about the Labour Party.
Well, Bridget, it is about the Labour Party because I think it's a lack of clarity. I mean, you echoed Sir Keir Starmer's position of Israel's right to defend itself, but that's not a position echoed by 350 of your councillors, including ministers and members of Parliament. And this rolled on yesterday, didn't it? Because Sir Keir Starmer gave a speech when he was wearing a poppy. And then moments later, he gave a speech where he was talking about Islamophobia, where he'd removed that poppy. Why is it that your leader views it as appropriate to wear a poppy when speaking to one audience and not when speaking to another audience in case it offends them?
Look, I just completely reject that. Keir Starmer proudly supports our armed forces and involves himself in those remembrance services and events across our country every single year. So I just flatly reject any suggestion that Keir Starmer acted in that way. He is very proud to back our armed forces and also to recognise the contribution that millions of people have made right throughout our history in giving us the freedoms today that we all enjoy, which does involve the freedom of expression, the freedom to protest that people fought for, that our military efforts secured in the Second World War. And I take the opportunity, as Keir does, every year to recognise that contribution in services. I'll be doing so this year in my local community here in Sunderland, and I know that Keir will be doing the same at a national level.
Keir Starmer will be giving a speech today in the North East talking about getting Britain building. Will he be wearing his poppy for that, Bridget?
I imagine so. We, all of us, take that incredibly seriously because we do want to demonstrate our support for those who served our country, especially for those who paid the highest price in defence of our freedoms. What Keir will be setting out today in the speech he's making here in the North East is how we ensure that opportunity and growth are spread right across our country, that we get Britain building and that we create the well-paid, highly skilled jobs that we desperately need, giving our young people the chance to get on, more apprenticeships, more skills training, a new generation of technical excellence colleges, and a real push around technical education. If we're going to secure growth in our country, then we have to back the skills of the British people in making that happen.
OK, Bridget, and what kind of jobs? You say here you want 65,000 jobs in clean energy. Can you explain what kind of jobs they would be and how they're going to be paid for?
Absolutely. So I'm speaking to you today from Sunderland, where we've long been world leaders in the automotive sector, and we've seen real advances where it comes to electric vehicles. So there are lots of jobs, for example, in the automotive sector as we make that shift away from combustion engines. Offshore wind, again, here in the North East and in large coastal communities across our country, real opportunities. Opportunities for engineering jobs, for welders, for much more besides. There's a real opportunity if we use the power of government working with business to create those jobs. So we'll be working with business to do that. Government can't do it alone. But I hear time and again that young people desperately want those kinds of opportunities for well-paid, highly skilled jobs, and that will be the real focus of the Labour government in making it happen. OK, Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary, thank you very much for taking time to speak to us this morning on GB News Breakfast. Appreciate it.
It's time to go through all the latest sports news, and for that, we're joined by GB News Breakfast sports presenter Paul Coit.
Morning. I have a few bits and pieces for you. We'll do a little bit of Erik ten Hag. I'm sort of like fed up with saying Erik ten Hag, when nothing's actually happened. But what has happened is that Manchester United have denied the fact that they are exploring possibilities of looking for another manager after him.
Which means they're doing it.
Of course it does. Yeah, because let's face it, no club will ever go into a situation where things are going bad and go, no, we're fine. We're not going to look at anybody else. They're always exploring possibilities.
If that were to happen, they've lost 8 out of the first, is it 15, 13?
Yeah, 15, 16. Yeah.
So they're having a stinker. Is it the worst start since 1962? Not good enough at Old Trafford. Let's just play a bit of fun. Who would be his replacement? Who's out there that they would really want?
This is the tricky thing, is that who do you go to? Who do you turn to? Everybody has that problem. Spurs have had a lot of luck with Ange Postecoglou. I say a lot of luck. I mean, it was great that they landed him. There's the amount of managers that are around at the moment. I think things are changing slightly as the style of manager. It's now, as we mentioned, you've got to deal with players differently. It's not that old-style manager that'll be... So, well, I've won this and this is always going to work, because football's always changing all the time. So who are they going to go
Alex
for?
Ferguson, he would have big problems with
I honestly do, and his legend. And the thing is, if we look at Manchester United, there's no divine right that they're going to be successful. They were hugely successful under Sir Alex, but look at any other manager, maybe Matt Busby going back to the 60s, but that's a long time ago. They were relegated in the 70s. After that, in the 80s, they were OK, but then it's when Sir Alex Ferguson came along, that's when things changed. So there's no divine right. Whether he's going to be the man or not, we don't know, but I don't think he's going to be around much longer.
It's the first round of the FA Cup, a hallowed moment in the football calendar. Can we expect any upset?
Well, possibly. I mean, I've got some details. 6.3 kilograms of sterling silver, the FA Cup. It is 61.5 centimetres tall. Took over 250 hours to make. And do you know how many there's been? How many FA Cups they've been since 1911?
I think there's been 3.
It's been 5. There's been 5. The last one's been there since 2014. And they've also made this heavier, so it's a bit more hard-wearing, and then whoever wins it has to return the trophy. There it is. Look, it's beautiful. It's the most beautiful trophy there is in sport. Has to be returned by March the 1st before the FA Cup final, because then it can go on its little tour, and it's in 3 parts there. You've got the base, and then you've got the other bit underneath and the lid as well.
And as you know, I always like to squeeze in Nottingham Forest, the only trophy Cloughie didn't lift, and I just love that trophy. To me, that is the essence of boyhood and football.
It is, and you've managed to get Nottingham Forest into our chat as well, which you haven't done so far, so well done.
That trophy?
No, I haven't. No, I've touched European Cup.
Have you?
Yeah.
Did you have to wear the gloves?
No.
Always here, you have to put the white gloves on.
Yeah, I went to the FIFA HQ in Switzerland and lifted it. I also lifted the World Cup.
You got in trouble, didn't you?
I lifted the World Cup.
You shouldn't have done, should you?
No, Budweiser.
Because only I think it's heads of state and people who have won the World Cup, it's
he often
ridiculous,
thinks he's the head of state,
are allowed
though,
to think. He probably thinks he's won the damn World Cup as well, too, frankly, don't you, Daubney?
But momentarily, the rules also extended to a News of the World reporter who'd had a long lunch.
OK, say no more. But one more thing, and that's Sheppey United, who are the lowest-ranked team. It's the first round proper, which begins tonight. They're playing Walsall, so they're playing at home. They usually have about 500 people go and see them. It's going to be a sellout, 1,400 people at the Isle of Sheppey.
Beautiful.
So that's the magic of the FA Cup.
Certainly is. Paul Coit, Magic Report. Thank you very much. OK, moving on. Coming up, the energy regulator Ofgem has summoned energy bosses for urgent meetings after new rules fail to stop debt agents. We'll be discussing this and much more in Headline Makers. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Pip.
And do you want us to go through some of the day's headlines? Is the Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and forecaster and author James Woodhousen. Thanks, gents. Welcome back. Fraser, I'm so glad you've picked this story. It's the COVID inquiry this week. We've seen the pantomime of Dominic Cummings, and what a show that's been. And I missed out a key word there. Fraser, in the Telegraph today, this is the key point that hasn't been raised. What is it?
Well, you know, we've been talking about Dominic Cummings swearing a lot all week. And what we haven't been talking about is whether lockdown was a good idea, whether it worked, whether that's the right approach to a pandemic. And one of the things that Fraser Nelson has picked up in the Telegraph is it actually comes from Dominic Cummings' written testimony, which is a lot more useful than the sort of what the inquiry itself was actually asking. And it points out, I mean, actually Cummings is trying to portray himself as a sort of hero here, but he arranged a lot of the modelling that brought us into lockdown. Now, it was making some pretty crazy claims, stuff like, you know, 100,000 people dying on hospital corridors just in the first wave of COVID, potentially hundreds of thousands of NHS beds needing to be taken up when actually about 30,000, you know, sorry, a lot, I mean, considerably less, fewer beds were needed in that wave. And no one really interrogated it. You know, even it wasn't, these models didn't come from Sage, they came from outsiders, from sort of tech bros, as they've been called, from various AI experts and things like that. But the scientists didn't interrogate it, they just went along with it. They just went along with the panic, even though the decision to lock down completely went against all of the previously established science. You know, there was no plan for a lockdown in all the years of pandemic preparedness that had been going on.
Well, they were still pushing for herd immunity only a few days before lockdown.
Well, that was just simply a reflection of that's the established way that a disease, you know, finishes, by having herd immunity, ideally through a vaccine. rather than by people getting infected. But that was a reflection of the science at the time, and it seems as if panic reigned. And we now know that, you know, we've seen Sweden didn't fall for a lockdown and has had much better results. They have some of the lowest excess deaths in Europe because not only did we not need a lockdown to contain COVID, but also all the other disastrous ill effects didn't come with it.
James, do you think we'll look back on this, and bear in mind there was no political opposition to this, was there? I mean, the Labour Party nodded along with the Tory Party. In fact, they wanted sooner, harder and longer lockdowns, and so did the Liberal Democrats. We had political uniformity on this. Why aren't those questions being asked at this inquiry, or is it because basically they all agree?
No, they do all agree, Martin. There's no doubt about it. I think for me as a forecaster, the quotation that comes to mind, oddly enough, is from Joseph Stalin. He said, "Paper will put up with anything that is written on it," which I think was very acute, even though it was Stalin. So these charts that they showed, all the forecasts and the curves and so on, a slide nowadays will put up with anything that you put on it. And there's a sort of spurious attempt at being scientific when all these curves and all of these forecasts, and Neil Ferguson at Imperial College and so on, have really deceived the public and assume a sort of mantle of a new priesthood, really, of forecasters, scientists, policy wonks who know everything while common people know nothing. Just a slide will do it. It's really deceptive. We've got to interrogate them and interrogate them again.
Do you not think at the time, though, they were acting in good faith?
Well, yeah, but, you know, lots of people act in good faith. Hitler acted in good faith, not to compare them with him. You know, they believed in what they were saying. But that doesn't mean we have to give them any credibility.
I think what the thing with this inquiry, and it's going to go on for a lot longer, isn't it? Is it ever going to tackle the damage to children's education, the damage to people's mental health?
No, it won't.
Being stuck at home.
I think it will come up, but I don't think it's you know, you can just see the way the inquiry is going. It's not going to recommend against school closures or lockdown. You can see that just from the tone of the leading lawyer. You know, when they had lockdown sceptical scientist Carl Hennigan in last week, you know, they berated him. They almost, it was as if he was responsible for the death toll. Whereas when they spoke to, you know, advisors from SAGE who recommended lockdown, the lawyer was putting words in his mouth saying, you raised the alarm, you're so clever, you're so brilliant, you saved us. Also, you know, the scope of this inquiry is just insane. They want to cover literally everything that has happened in the past couple of years. I mean, Brexit came up in the first session. They were trying to pin it on Brexit. They want to use the inquiry to look at racial inequality. Anything and everything that's happened in the UK, or I should say, all of the liberal elite obsessions are going to be targeted at this inquiry.
It's interesting how it's been a bit of a pinata, you know, bashing session of Boris. Until now, Boris himself is due to give evidence, I think, in December. And I wonder if we will see him sort of, because we've heard rumours that he favoured a more Swedish approach, a more libertarian approach, keep the economy running. Do you think that will come out, or do you think Boris is going to come out of this quite badly?
Well, in the end, you know, Boris has to be judged by his actions and the decisions that he actually took, which was to lock us down 3 times. So, you know, whether he had his doubts, I think it's interesting to know that. I mean, people are poring over some of the things he said in private WhatsApp, saying, you know, he talked about elderly people. This is nature's way of dealing with elderly people, and that shows what an evil, callous person he was, how reckless he was, how many people have died as a result of his decisions. What's funny is that some of that stuff, particularly the comments on the elderly, it's in Patrick Vallance's diary, and Patrick Vallance says, I don't necessarily disagree with that. Now, people haven't quite picked up on that because they want to say Boris is evil. They don't want to, you know, make similar criticisms of some of the leading scientific figures.
I think what has raised eyebrows, James, in some quarters is when Dominic Cummings was questioned and he was asked, you put into government someone who, in your view, was unfit, and Cummings said yes. And then he was asked, are you sorry? And the answer from Cummings was no. The alternative was a second Brexit referendum.
Well, you know, we can make it about individuals and who said what when and all of those things, right? They're all completely disreputable. They behaved appallingly. And the coup de grace is really that they've already spent £100 million on this inquiries. Who will benefit from that, if not the new priesthood of lawyers and the whole legal system? It's a complete outrage.
There's a lot of families there in the room and watching it, though, who do want to hear what this inquiry has to say.
Well, I want to hear what it has to say. But so far, the lady judge has been, as Fraser says, entirely partisan. Her interrogation of Carl Hennigan was absolutely disgraceful. And, you know, the families are not getting the justice that they so fully deserve by this distorted, biased and partisan inquiry that she has led.
Well, the next explosive evidence will be, I think, from former Health Secretary Matt Hancock.
Yeah, and that
will be interesting.
That won't be pretty, will it? Should we move on? James, we talked about energy bosses earlier. What's this story about? You're picking this up from Times Online.
Well, the Scottish Power, which is all one word, has inadvertently, it claims, sent 20 debt collectors into homes in Scotland to install prepayment meters. Right. And a couple of them were mothers, one with young mothers with a 6-week-old baby. And the government's response is weak, and the response of Ofgem, the regulator, is that they, you know, have asked for an explanation. How very decisive. You know, when does somebody break into Ofgem's offices and install a meter? The CEO, Jonathan Brearley, is paid about 300 grand a year. They've expanded their staff from about 1,200 to 1,400 in the past year. And they are, of course, unelected. They're a power in the land.
And quickly, Fraser, we only have a few moments left. It's always the poorest who get hit the hardest with these kind of tariffs they put on. How are the working classes?
Absolutely. You know, they want us to put us on prepayment meters, smart meters. That, you know, they're a hidden danger, because then that is a route to sort of energy rationing, essentially. You know, you're going to be encouraged or discouraged from using energy at the time when you need it, after work, before work. And perhaps you should have a shower at night or something like that is what they want you to do to save energy and save money.
And meanwhile, none of this will affect any of them on their massive salaries. Fraser and James, fabulous headline makers. Really appreciate it. Thank you. But before we move on, here is your latest weather forecast.
Good morning, it's Alex Burkill here again with your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it won't be anywhere near as stormy as it was yesterday for many of us, there is still some unsettled weather around, particularly across eastern parts of Scotland, northeast England. A deep area of low pressure that was Ciarán is now bringing some heavy rain and some strong winds here. We could see some further flooding and disruption to travel given how wet it has been in this area during recent weeks. Also a scattering of showers elsewhere, mainly coming in from the northwest. Some of them could be heavy and thundery, but with sunny spells in between. In the south, we're likely to see highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. Further showers continuing as we go through the evening and overnight. Still, some of them could be heavy. Couldn't rule out some rumbles of thunder, mainly in areas exposed to that northwesterly wind. And then towards the end of the night, some persistent rain and strong winds starting to push into the far southwest. We may see a few mist and fog patches developing further north, and it could be a little chilly where we see any clear skies developing as well. Through Saturday itself then, any mist and fog will clear through the morning, and then this swathe of wet and windy weather spills its way northwards across many parts of England and Wales. Something drier to the north of it, though, some showery rain across the far north of Scotland and heavy showers following in the south, and these could cause some impacts as we go through the afternoon and the evening across southeastern parts. Temperatures similar to today, likely to see highs of around 14 or 15.
Coming up, the clearing up after Storm Ciarán. We'll bring you the very latest next. Stay with us. This is GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new
It's
teeth.
your new
It's- I
teeth.
know.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 3rd of November. Today, this is what we have been talking about so far, including the second named storm in 2 weeks has brought more hurricane-force winds, heavy rainfall and flooding, and Storm Ciarán isn't done yet.
The Channel Islands appear to have been worst hit. Many schools across the south of England too are closed today. Some areas are in the clean-up phase, whereas for others the storm has just begun.
An escape from Gaza. Hundreds more foreign nationals and the seriously injured are able to cross the border into Egypt as Israel claims their troops are at the height of battle against Hamas. Also, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Israel as he faces an uphill struggle to try and pause the fighting in the region.
King Charles's state visit to Kenya concludes later today. Despite stopping short of making a full apology over Britain's colonial past, it appears the monarch's visit has been well received.
Plus, we're debating whether the UK should invest more in space. This comes after the UK's space agency agreed to a deal with an American company to fund an all-British mission into orbit for research purposes. And hello, I'm Martin Daubney.
Good morning, I'm Pip Thompson, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Let's bring you more on our top story this morning. Storm Ciarán, which swept across the British Isles and the Channel Islands, leaving roofs torn off, roofs torn off homes and cars smashed by golf ball-sized hailstones.
Yeah, gusts of up to 100 miles an hour were recorded yesterday as almost 20,000 homes and businesses across the UK were left without power at lunchtime.
Train services were disrupted across southwest England with heavy flooding and trampolines on the track. Planes were forced to go around as they struggled to land safely during heavy winds.
And the Met Office says it will continue to impact Scotland and parts of northern England, but strong winds will gradually ease throughout the day.
Let's talk to the star of Real Housewives of Jersey, Tessa Hartman, because the clue is in the introduction. Tessa? I was going to call you Jessa then. Tessa, you live on Jersey, don't you? Tell me what you've experienced over the last few hours and how it's looking this morning.
Well, the sun is out here in Jersey, and you know, it's an island that's 9 miles long, 5 miles wide, and I don't think there was a bit of it that was untouched by this horrific storm. Very frightening to a lot of islanders here. You know, the impact and the devastation that it's left across the island is unbelievable. There was also like a tornado that ripped through a place called St. Clement's. Houses were devastated. It was really a very terrifying experience. It was one of these major weather events that you read about that happen in other territories, but you never think it's coming to you. And I think it was very scary, but we are very resilient. We are a community spirit, and I have to say the government of Jersey, give them their due. They did very well in preparing the islanders of what to expect and keeping in communication with everyone.
Yeah, and Tessa, we've been sent footage from GB News viewers, Stephen, Jack and Jess, and we saw lots of devastation, roofs ripped apart, windows caved in, cars underwater, torrents of water down the way. Now the worst of the storm has passed. I'm assuming the sun was out where you are now, but what's the clear-up looking like? How much work is there ahead?
Look, I think it's going to take them quite a long time. I mean, yesterday I literally just wandered around our local roads. There's a lot of very country roads, and everything was devastated. There are trees everywhere. The government are doing what they can to clear it up. They've advised everybody to try and stay indoors again today. Schools are out today again. They're at home. People are being advised to work from home. I suspect it's going to take them quite a few days to clear up all the broken trees, because it is a significant amount of work that needs to be done. But as I say, everyone's coming together. You know, I've got a local WhatsApp group of neighbours. Everyone's been looking out for each other, helping out where we can. So it's very much community spirit is alive and well here in Jersey.
What are the roads like, Tessa? You know, are there road closures? Those puddles that people think they're driving into, and they turn into a proper full-blown flood?
Yeah, some of them are unbelievable. I mean, the scene of devastation along the front of St. Helier was like something out of a horror film. And it sounded like that when you were going through it during the night. I don't think anyone here slept at all on Thursday evening. The roads are a lot of work has been done on the roads. They have cleared up a lot, but there's still an awful lot of work to do because there's so many country roads. You know, the nature of Jersey is that there's lots of hills and small country like through farm roads, and there are so many trees. It's just going to take some time. But as I say, they certainly are keeping everybody informed. The local media here too are doing a great job. So everybody I think is looking a bit relieved and optimistic. But how much it's going to cost them, and once they assess the real damage, remains to be seen. The airport opens this afternoon at 2 p.m. And I know that the Condor ferry got in this morning, which will be a relief to lots of islanders, because that's how we get all our food and supplies. So.
OK, Tessa Hartman, thank you so much for talking to us this morning and bringing that update, and do hope that it's a much quieter weekend for you. You have to be so careful if you're out on the roads. I remember a few years ago, Christmas Eve night or Christmas Day night, my parents went to see an elderly relative in a care home took my granddad, who was clutching a homemade Christmas trifle.
Right.
They went down a country lane, what they thought was a puddle, massive flood, and of course it was dark, they couldn't see anything. Car starts filling up with water. Thank goodness for mobile phones. Fire brigade came out, rescued my parents and my granddad through the window, and he came home on an ambulance still clutching the homemade trifle.
Didn't spill a drop.
Did not spill a drop, and luckily they were OK. But it's so. I mean, we've seen the pictures of people's cars getting stuck, and
Yeah.
Just watch how you go.
Still good to see that Tessa had time for a full makeover. Always good to see. Excellent stuff. Moving on now. Israel says its forces have completed the encirclement of Gaza City as it continues to strike Hamas militants in populated areas, with a spokesman calling it another significant stage in this war.
Meanwhile, in the south, around 92 British dual nationals have been permitted to cross the Rafah crossing in Egypt today, with the in-laws of Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, among them.
And the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Israel for further talks on humanitarian pauses in the fighting.
Our security reporter Mark White is in southern Israel with the latest. Mark, I think we are looking at some pictures. We are looking at Gaza City now. Bring us up to date with the latest.
Yeah, I'm just staying out of the way of the camera at the moment so we can concentrate on the Gaza skyline there. You're looking down towards Beit Hanun in the north of Gaza. There have been some significant air strikes just in the last couple of minutes before you came to us. So we're just going to continue to monitor that skyline in case there are any more strikes. But yeah, some very significant activity just in the last 5 minutes or so. There have been constant artillery fire from this area, also tank fire, and then fairly frequently we get the combat jets coming over as well, and the missiles released. There's a massive big shockwave that we even feel here reverberates through our bodies, so you can just imagine what it's like much further into the source of these explosions. They are enormous. Now, the Israelis are at pains to constantly point out that they don't target civilians. However, as part of this operation, they are bombing civilian areas, albeit they've asked civilians to head south repeatedly over recent days, and hundreds of thousands, though, have still decided they want to stay. And the result is they are staying and they are getting caught up in what is a relentless ground war by the Israelis, because the Israelis are adamant there will be no ceasefire. They say they are going to continue on with their ground war until they destroy Hamas. And that means pushing further and further into these built-up areas, striking with missiles, striking with artillery and tank fire, and taking on those Hamas terrorists with hand-to-hand combat. Effectively, they're going street to street, door to door, all of the while the Israelis tell us that they are suffering in terms of attacks from Hamas. Anti-tank missiles are being fired, RPG are being fired at them. Machine gun fire is regularly reverberating through the air here. We hear that now. I can hear in the distance, the mic probably doesn't pick it up, but there's more in the way of machine gun fire. And what happens is when that machine gun fire is triggered, you hear bursts of it, sustained bursts of machine gun fire. It means effectively that the Israelis have made contact. They've come across Hamas terrorists who've actually either another large explosion there with a huge plume of black-grey smoke now rising over the treetops there down towards the eastern outskirts of Beit Hanun. Another large airstrike. We're hearing the jets overhead that are coming in to launch these strikes. And as I say, the machine gun fire, it is because they've made contact, either being ambushed or they've come across a Hamas stronghold somewhere, and that's when they call in these jet fighters to release their missiles. Another large explosion there. Can't see the smoke from where that is coming from. But this an indication, guys, that, you know, this battle is still raging right here in the north of Gaza, despite the fact we're hearing from the Israeli Defense Forces that they have pushed further south, that they are encircling Gaza City. And that, of course, is another big part of their operation, the next important phase, it's described as by the Israelis, going into that Hamas stronghold. Beit Hanun, yes, of course, there are significant Hamas numbers, but Gaza City is the stronghold. That's where they're headquartered. That's where hundreds of tunnel entrances are scattered throughout that city, and rocket launching positions and other positions waiting for the Israelis to eventually push into that city. It's going to be a long and a bloody battle ahead, as overhead we hear the telltale sound of a drone flying overhead as well.
With that aerial bombardment and then the ground engagement, as you say, Gaza City now encircled, Hamas dug in a huge underground network of tunnels, but the IDF, Benjamin Netanyahu, they've sworn they will not stop until Hamas have been completely wiped out. So we're now in that urban, face-to-face, close quarters combat phase of this operation, aren't we, Mark? It's getting dirty.
Yes, and Israel point to a statement made by Ghazi Hamad, who is a senior Hamas leader, being interviewed just 2 days ago, when he was asked about whether he wanted a ceasefire. And he said absolutely not, that they will continue to fight Israel. And he warned that there will be more October 7th, that is Hamas's stated goal, which is to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, and they will not rest as a group until they have achieved that aim. So Israel looks at that as all the evidence they ever needed to continue with this ground campaign, because, of course, understandably, there's so much concern for the hundreds of thousands of people caught up in this. But Israel say, we stop now, all we do is we allow Hamas to regroup, they feel emboldened, and they just target our civilian communities again. That's why they're pushing on with the destruction that you're seeing there until they reach this stated goal, if they ever get to it, of destroying Hamas, or at least degrading it to such an extent that it no longer poses a threat to the Israeli population.
And as we look at the images, we see these ongoing airstrikes, Mark. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza, so we can't actually verify this claim, but they claim that more than 9,000 people have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the 7th of October. I think we just could hear the sound of another airstrike there.
That's artillery, outgoing artillery. So you might see soon the impact area where that artillery shell has landed. But yeah, those artillery sounds are, just constant as well. There are artillery positions really on both sides of where we are, as well as tank fire coming from an area not too far from our position. And we're hearing an Apache helicopter now above as well. Now, the Apache gunships effectively have these Hellfire and another explosion there from our outgoing artillery barrage. The Apache gunships, they have, in the UK, Hellfire missiles, but the equivalent here, if it's not Hellfire, they can strike from miles out, and they can be pinpoint accurate in the place that they are aiming to fire at, even though they are effectively overhead here. And so we can hear constantly the Apaches coming over, the drones, the constant hum of those drones, which are, I think, mainly surveillance drones, giving the Israelis a good eye view of the battlefield. And then we hear also quite regularly the combat jets coming over that get called in by the ground troops when they make contact with the Hamas fighters. Yesterday, the IDF were saying that there was fierce fighting in that area you're looking at right there, Beit Hanun, with Hamas fighters dug into some of the high-rise buildings. You can probably see, if Ben pans to the right of frame for you, there are some high-rises that are still reasonably intact. It seems so there are still plenty of buildings for Hamas to be dug into, and they're just waiting. They're waiting for the troops, and they're waiting for the tanks, and as the tanks approach, they get ambushed, and then the Israelis have to respond to that. We know that we're hearing more sustained gunfire now coming from the direction of Beit Hanun, which probably means that the air cover, the Apache that we're hearing overhead, very sustained fire out now. Smoke also on the horizon there. That may well have been the Apache, I think, that fired the missiles at location there. So another plume of smoke filling the Gaza skyline over there, as clearly that fighting in that area, which we're right in the north of Gaza, we're just close to the border where we are with southern Israel. So the fact that these Hamas fighters are still dug in there and are still requiring a lot of effort from the Israeli military to shift them gives an indication of what we're going to see actually in Gaza City, because this is nothing in comparison to that stronghold further south. But it's still very significant nonetheless, as you're able to hear and see from these live images looking over into northern Gaza now and seeing the absolute pummeling that those Hamas positions are getting, those Hamas positions, we should add, that are dug into civilian areas.
We listened to your very valuable commentary, Mark. We must just mention the British nationals that are still stuck, have been stuck since early October there. How many do we know how many might be allowed to leave Gaza today via the Rafah crossing into Egypt?
So we're told that on the latest list that's coming out, there will be just under 100 British nationals. There are other potentially dual nationals, Irish nationals as well. So the difficulty in trying to talk ahead of what's going to happen is even though it's supposedly controlled, it is so chaotic. People on the ground are under fire a lot of the time and not in positions where they can safely get to the Rafah crossing. So although 92 names might be on the list of British nationals today, that does not mean that they'll be able to get to the crossing and able to cross, either because they don't feel it's safe to move from where they are, maybe they're not in a position because, you know, they've been injured or a member of their family has been injured. There's all kinds of reasons. We were expecting about 400 US citizens to leave yesterday. In the end, Joe Biden said it was just over 70. So lots going on the ground that means that the exodus of these foreign nationals through the Rafah crossing is not as straightforward as we'd like it to be.
OK, Mark White, thank you for that dramatic update from the Gazan border. Artillery pounding in to Gaza there from air, from land. We're now going to a break. Coming up, King Charles's final visit to Kenya. The final day is today. We'll look back at that successful trip. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Pip.
Now, King Charles's 4-day state visit to Kenya concludes today. Despite falling short of making a full apology for the atrocities suffered by Kenyans during their struggle for independence from British colonial rule, the visit has been deemed a success.
Our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, joins us now in the studio. Good morning, Cameron.
Good morning.
What are your reflections then?
Do you know, I think on the whole, it's been a relatively successful trip, but of course it has some very serious notes as well. We know, of course, that the King did not offer a full apology for the atrocities from Mau Mau uprising 60 years ago, but he expressed regret and he met with relatives of those survivors of those atrocities. They have also marked conservation work with the Queen feeding baby elephants, the King in Mombasa yesterday helping to replenish coral in the region, bringing up that marine life and shoring up marine life as well as tourism. This morning we have pictures of the King visiting the Mombasa Memorial Cathedral. He's hearing about work of the Coast Interfaith Council of Clerics in promoting peace, security and development on the Kenyan coast. So he's meeting representatives of Christianity, Muslim and Hindu, and as well as traditional African faiths as well. Of course, in the region, there is perhaps a bit of a terrorism issue. We've got the Al-Shabaab terrorist group working in that region. And the King, for his whole life, really, has really tried to get different religious groups talking together and create a bit of harmony there. So that's what the King is doing this morning. As for the Queen, she's been visiting survivors of domestic violence at the Situation Room, which is a charity in Mombasa helping women there. She was giving gifts to them and she received gifts as well. Of course, domestic violence, a really big issue that she cares passionately about, the Queen.
Excellent. So it's been a superb trip, I think, all round. I think it's been a huge example of that soft, kind of lovely power that the royal family does so well.
Yeah, and there'll be plenty more to talk about it, I think, on Britain's Newsroom, which is coming up next. Thank you for your company this morning. Whatever you're doing this weekend, if you get to a bonfire party, do watch how you go. But hopefully it will be a calmer weekend for you after Storm Ciarán, or Storm Ciarán, however you say it.
Fingers crossed.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Good morning, it's Alex Burkill here again with your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it won't be anywhere near as stormy as it was yesterday for many of us, there is still some unsettled weather around, particularly across eastern parts of Scotland, northeast England. A deep area of low pressure, that was Ciarán, is now bringing some heavy rain and some strong winds here. We could see some further flooding and disruption to travel given how wet it has been in this area during recent weeks. Also a scattering of showers elsewhere, mainly coming in from the northwest. Some of them could be heavy and thundery, but with sunny spells in between. In the south, we're likely to see highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. Further showers continuing as we go through the evening and overnight. Still, some of them could be heavy. Couldn't rule out some rumbles of thunder, mainly in areas exposed to that northwesterly wind. And then towards the end of the night, some persistent rain and strong winds starting to push into the far southwest. We may see a few mist and fog patches developing further north, and it could be a little chilly where we see any clear skies developing as well. Through Saturday itself then, any mist and fog will clear through the morning, and then this swathe of wet and windy weather spills its way northwards across many parts of England and Wales. Something drier to the north of it, though, some showery rain across the far north of Scotland and heavy showers following in the south, and these could cause some impacts as we go through the afternoon and the evening across southeastern parts. Temperatures similar to today, likely to see highs of around 14 or 15.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day.